What's up, guys? We are live. So the epic part two to the Andrew versus Jazmen debate is here. We got Jazmen looking ever so lovely, and Andrew looking also extremely lovely with his plaid shirt and dark background. Anyway, so in this debate, we're going to be focusing on different topics. We're going to be debating.
Please, don't ever call me lovely, Alex. Ever.
I thought you were
This
comfortable.
just no lovely, no.
Okay.
Let's not.
Andrew looking
We
ugly and
can agree on
horrendous.
that.
Andrew looking horrendous as ever. Okay, anyway, so the two topics are what's better for society, Christian nationalism versus secularism, and should women get married and have kids young. So two interesting topics. The format's going to be the same. Both people get to make a 1-2 minute opening statement. I'm not going to be a Nazi about the time, but let's keep it under 3 minutes. After that, it's going to be just open panel discussion, and then there'll be a quick closing statement. Okay, so let's start off with the first topic, which again is, I believe we said Christian nationalism versus secularism, correct?
That's correct.
All right, cool. So yeah, that's the first topic. Let's I guess we'll just switch off. So for the first one, I'll have you give your opening statement first, Jazmen, and then we'll switch off. And for the other one, I'll have Andrew go first.
Okay, so yeah, I believe secularism is much better than not Christian nationalism because it contributes to human flourishing and justice a lot more. One of the biggest factors that influences this belief is that I love America and I'm really proud to be an American. My parents immigrated from Iran after the 1979 revolution, where religious law is the law of the land. In that case, it's Sharia law. So I being here and not only being able to experience the freedoms I have, but with going through law school and having the educational attainment that I've had, learning about how this country was founded made me appreciate those privileges even more. We were the first nation to be founded on a separation of church and state, and I think it's one of the reasons this is the greatest country on earth. Our Constitution starts with the words, "We the people," and that is where we get our power and authority. There are no references to God or religion in the Constitution except for the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. It's also in Article 6 when it says no religious test shall ever be required to any office or public trust under the United States. The founding fathers set up our country this way because they knew the dangers of not doing it. And secularism is what grants us the freedoms we have: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of privacy, and so forth. It allows us to ground our legal framework in principles that ensure justice, individual rights, and overall well-being of society. Instead of focusing on religious dogmatism, we use rational and evidence-based approach to influence policy. And we can just see from the evidence that it works out better. The most secular countries in the world today fare much better on nearly every measure of peace, prosperity, and social well-being, including infant mortality, life expectancy, educational achievement, economic prosperity, freedom, and so forth. We have lower murder rates, violent crime in these countries. Even if you look at states, which I thought this was really interesting, on every measure of social well-being, from poverty rates to STDs to DUIs, the most secular states, or like the least religious, tend to also fare better than more religious states. And yeah.
Cool. All right, Andrew, you are up.
Now, Jazmen, my opening is going to be a bit longer than yours. I hope that you'll humor me as I go through it. If you want to give a bit of a longer response, that's fine. But okay, thank you. I appreciate that. People are always requesting that I talk more about my views of rights, what I think a right is and what I think it isn't, and how this interacts with the world. This debate between worldviews seems like a perfect time to lay this out. The difference between Christian nationalism or Christian futurism, the Christian right in general, and neo-progressives, those being communist, socialist, and even the modern right wing, is this very idea of rights. And you saw Jazmen brought this up. A right from our worldview is just an entitlement, absent duty and virtue. You do nothing for it, you just have it. The great lie, however, is that these entitlements, rights, they can't even exist. You see, when these entitlements get put into practice, we see one side or the other of the political paradigm move to either expand or remove the entitlement. This is based around the different perceptions of duty. So when we apply what is the responsibility or duty of having the right in practice, we can't agree. So we move most often to limit the entitlement because, after all, like most entitlements, they become abused, bastardized, and ultimately subverted from their original intent. This is due to the fact that such entitlements or rights, if you want to call them that, can really only exist in practice if we have a virtuous society that pushes duties assigned to each entitlement so each one is earned or practiced correctly. This applies to all of your so-called rights. Is it virtuous to yell fire in a crowded room with no fire? The answer is no, so we limit that right. Is it virtuous to speak truth to power, on the other hand? Yes, though the extent of that must also be negotiated. Is it virtuous to own a gun? No. Is it virtuous to own a gun to defend your family? Yes. Is it virtuous to own a gun to hurt innocent people? No. So really what is actually being argued over is the duties and virtues that citizens must have in society and their responsibilities to themselves and others. And the fight over these entitlements ultimately yields nothing good, as they just become eroded by the distinct worldview differences in how to apply responsibilities and duties to them, which is why a right or an entitlement is just ultimately whatever the guy with the power says it is. Jazmen here is going to argue tonight against Christian nationalism from the basis of rights. I called it, and she did, a laughable position for a secularist to take, as what she considers entitlements are just sets of preferences which ultimately don't maximize utility or consequences for the society that she claims to value so much. From her worldview, you have a right to fuck your sister on camera while people masturbate. She thinks you have a right to sleep with a dead body if nobody ever found out about it because it hurts nobody. She thinks prostitution is just swell in society and pornography because you have a fundamental right to do so based on nothing more than her preferences. So I give you this hypothetical experiment, which maps on well to reality. Assume I came to the Christian worldview of ethics absent the belief in God. I believe everything they believe in regard to morals, but just don't accept that God is real. Jazmen, on the other hand, says the entirety of all human morality is adjudicated by her preferences, no different than I do in this hypothetical scenario. How do we determine who is right? We would have to go by utility or consequences. So I would like Jazmen to explain how a mother of three has less utility to society than an OnlyFans prostitute who has sex on Twitter for money. How does it maximize utility or give good consequences to allow incest? How is it maximum utility to allow necrophilia? And most importantly, how would my Christian nationalist society give bad outcomes by simply outlawing all of these things, all of them? What's more, how does society end up being worse consequentially off under authoritarianism, not allowing these entitlements? Also, why would it be immoral for Christians to be in power under a theocratic moral foundation instead of a secularist foundation of morality? Ultimately, Jazmen will agree with the universal morality of Christianity, but only take exceptions to the fact they won't promote degeneracy, which ultimately is all she wants rights for, degeneracy. She won't take issue for our morality on murder, charity, chastity, decency, virtue, duty, none of it. She'll only be able to make the case that she doesn't want the world I postulate because it doesn't allow for her brand of degeneracy. So with that, I yield my opening time, and I'm happy to get into the debate.
Just for the record, PWF is fully on board with fucking your sister if your sister is hot. Okay, anyway, let's get into the open panel portion. So have at it, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, so I just want to say that I don't think that rights are rights if they just my point isn't that we should only have rights when they have no harm. Most of the rights that we have some harm associated with it, but that freedom, and our country is founded on freedom, and it instead of religious dogma, is what outweighs that. So for instance, freedom of speech.
Who cares what the country's founded on?
No.
We're having an argument.
Still matters,
Just
even
wait a
though
second.
people can
Hang
say
on.
mean things. Right?
I want to know.
You like your freedom to gun. Well, you said I could have a while to respond. You just went on this
Oh
wild thing.
yeah, that's fair. Go ahead. That's fair.
10 seconds. And then you also say, like, so for instance, I assume you really like your right to own guns. Well, guns also harm people. Now, I believe in your right to the Second Amendment. And I believe that you having that right outweighs that your whatever harm that guns bring about, at least when it comes to generally the ownership of guns. I think Andrew's main thing is that he believes that because he believes in an objective morality, which even that, the only reason you believe that your God is better than other gods is only because of your subjective beliefs. At the end of the day, your morality is pretty much just as subjective as mine. The only reason someone would choose one religious morality over another is they feel that it has a better moral framework for objective truth. If you think Christianity has a better moral framework than Islam, you need a moral basis on which to judge that. And it can't be the religion
Jazmen.
itself.
Let's let her.
I just want to correct this so that she understands. I've granted this worldview is true. I'm assuming that I came to the Christian ethics that I have under a secularist purview, meaning that I'm not saying that it's based on a God or anything else. I'm agreeing with you. I came to it completely subjectively. Why am I wrong and you're right?
So But the framework you want to hold up is Christian. You want it to be you want our country to be a theocracy.
Right. So that's why I need to explain this to you, right? Assume that I came to the same exact worldview that I hold right now, just absent God through secularism. So I reject your notion of rights and I reject your notion of entitlements. I reject your notion of everything. Okay. But I'm not basing anything on God. I'm basing it purely off of a subjective standard for the purpose of this thought experiment, meaning I came to all of these views through a secular ethos. Why am I wrong and you're right?
I would say you're wrong and I'm right, because at least in this country, your worldview wants to alter our history, our values, our national identity. I just gave you some reasons that secular countries tend to fare off worse than countries that are run by a religious doctrine as the law of the land. And I think
Jazmen, don't you
America,
mean
one of the reasons.
I think you're trying to say better, right? Not worse. Secular
Yeah.
countries.
Sorry if I misspoke, but I would say that, like, if you don't like America, if you don't like the freedoms that we have here,
Then
that's
get
okay.
out,
I
right?
just do.
Then
Huh?
get out. If you don't like it,
I mean,
then get
honestly, yeah,
out.
I'm really proud to live here. So if you're basically saying that America's freedoms that they grant us are bad, and I'm saying when I look at the world and I look at what freedoms other people don't have, like the countries my parents came from, while we have those rights here, I look at this as a good. And I'm happy to live here.
Yeah.
If
So
you
let's
prefer to live there,
back
I
up.
think that's true.
So hang on, let's back up because you're not actually responding to this. I'm gonna tell it to you again. I'm assuming for a second in this hypothetical that I have come to the worldview that I hold absent a God, meaning it's just purely secular in nature. Okay. And I hold all the same values I do, but I don't base any of them on some murderousness sky daddy, as you would put it, right? Why would those values be wrong and your values would be right if we're both subjectivists?
I mean, I'm not saying that your views are objectively wrong and mine are objectively
Then
right.
if my views are not objectively wrong, then me advocating for Christian nationalism and completely repealing everything in the United States to make it format around Christian values under a secular purview would be fine.
So yeah, if you want to sit here on the internet and argue with a porn star about a revolution that you want to have on the internet, go for it. Good luck, right?
So
Our
you're
Constitution
conceding,
has lasted this long for a reason.
so
I
you're
just gave
conceding.
you. I'm saying that you don't have an objective morality and I don't have an objective morality.
You're right.
So we're on the same footing.
So if it's true that we're just both coming at this from two different subjective worldviews, and you claim that mine is just as valid as yours, what is your argument for why it is that I should not impose my version of this on society and should instead yield to yours?
I'm not saying you shouldn't. You can advocate for it. That's what freedom of speech is. You can sit on the internet, you can have your channel, you can advocate for it. But our Constitution and our branches of government are this way, and they've been this way for a while. Now, there's little differences. Supreme Court may interpret the First Amendment in different ways. But if you want to get rid of the First Amendment, if you want to get rid of our entire country, America as it is, you have the right to try to sit there and convince people to do that. Go for it. I don't have a problem with that. I just think it would be a bad idea. And the reason I think it would be a bad idea.
Problem with that, you're saying it's not immoral to do, so you have no objection to people doing it.
I have no objection to people trying to, I think just like our founding fathers decided to make this country based off reason, debate, winning in the marketplace of ideas. I do think that's the way to do that. So if you want to have a revolution with guns and overthrow people, I don't think that's good, but I can't sit here and stop you from trying to do it unless you're doing something, illegal, and then, the powers that be.
Yeah. So then you have no moral objection to it. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And if we did
end
up,
hang on,
stop. Let me finish. So since you have no moral objection to this, since you have no argument against this, since you don't think that it's wrong for Christian nationalists to advocate for this, since you don't think it's wrong for us to go ahead and reform the entire nation under whatever purview that we want, what in the world is your argument to keep the status quo then?
Because I just told you, when you look at secular countries in the world today, one, I love America. I think our freedoms are great. And that's based on my subjective worldview, but so is yours. You just admit it. So if yours is subjective and mine is subjective, but mine is also the status quo, and it seems to have better outcomes on every measure you can. When we look at other countries who are not secular, on infant mortality, life expectancy, educational achievement, economic prosperity, freedom, when we're looking at murder rates, crime rates, the American model has worked. And so if you want to come in, you're the burden of proof is on you. You're the one that wants to get rid of the status quo. You want to get rid of our freedoms. So you have to explain to me why your also subjective worldview.
There can't be a burden of proof placed on me to prove something which you've already declared is not immoral and not problematic from your purview. What burden of proof should I bring to the table? You've already said this. You've already said this. But if we're going to go, well, so I'm going to kind of go ahead into your worldview a little bit more just to humor you, because you're saying, okay, I guess the one objection that I could find is that you think that the outcomes are worse. This is kind of what you're saying.
Yes. And okay, also I believe your subjective moral framework, obviously it doesn't align with my also subjective moral framework. So ours are both subjective. If you want to start claiming yours is objective, we can get into that.
Okay, so let's go. We can go off of the consequences.
But you're the one that wants to eliminate our entire history, our national identity, get rid of America as it is. So I would love to hear your argument as to why. I would love to hear
because you have no objection.
Argument as to why is just
you have no
that
objection.
I don't have an objective moral framework.
You have no objection. You said I have no objection to this. So there is no argument to it.
I have an objection. I don't think that I have a objective moral objection. That's what I'm saying.
I think what she's saying.
Wait,
just let me really quickly clarify. I think what she's saying, she has an objection from an outcomes-based perspective.
Right. So I'll grant that too. I'll grant the outcomes just to.
And I would also add, Alex,
I just want to let you know that
an objection based on my subjective moral framework. I'd also have an objection there.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. It's your preferences, this type of thing. I just want to let you know that the debate was already over before we began, because you have no moral reason, to claim. You have no moral.
Neither
absolutely
do you.
Not one. Yeah, but that's my
Neither
point.
Do you.
That's my point. My point is to say, if
so
I have,
I just want to know how you win.
Stop. I'm going to explain.
Tell me how you win. If
neither
of us have an objective
you have to stop talking for long enough for me to explain it.
Debate, you got to answer the question. How come you win if we're on the same footing?
I'm going to tell you why. Because if we stalemate the board and you say your worldview is just as valid as my worldview is, and that means that you can't have any objection to my advocation for any of the things that I advocate for. Period. Even if what I'm advocating for is a theocracy. That's why. Now, that aside, I'm still willing to grant the worldview for the sake of argument, for the consequences. Let's start with this. Who is Leonid Radvinsky? Do you know who that is?
I don't know who that is, but I want to go back because I'm not done with
the
other part of the conversation.
I want to let you know that Leonid... No, you want to move back to this and do a circle again? Okay,
we're not done. You can't just move on when I haven't had a chance to respond to you. If you would like to move on, I'll just go back to this, and it's just going to make the debate longer than it has to be.
Go ahead.
You are literally what is a walking incorrect LSAT question, except it's too incorrect and too easy. It would be a layup LSAT question that nobody going to a first-year law school would even get wrong, which is like, oh, you can't prove your subjective moral framework is right. Therefore, I automatically win. And the question would be, what's wrong with Andrew's argument? It's wrong because just because I can't prove my moral framework, but you also can't prove yours, doesn't mean yours is right. At best, it means it's a draw. So tell me how you win under that metric.
I'm going to tell you why. Because if I come to the exact same ethical system and foundations that I have right now, right this second, those ethical frame systems say to eradicate and eliminate all of your ethical framework. It says to me to do everything that I can possibly do to destroy the degeneracy that you propose for society by any means necessary, essentially. And because you have no objection to doing that, you can't actually object to me doing that.
No, because I don't have a philosophical objection that's grounded in objective morality. That doesn't mean that I don't have any objection at all. And you still didn't answer the question. If yours is subjective and mine is subjective, how did you win the debate about Christian nationalism being better than secularism? How did you meet that?
Well, so what we're looking at here, we're trying to look at the framework and say, if we're going to look for society, okay, and what are going to be the goals and kind of the outcomes for society that we want, we have to kind of start with what our foundation is going to be. So as we started, you said that the foundation that I have is just as valid as the foundation that you have. Under the purview,
Philosophically,
yes, but now
you
hang
don't
on.
have a better
If
philosophical
you will
framework.
stop, I'll explain the rest of it. The flip
Okay,
side
just
to the
don't
coin
sit
now is I can say this, but because I'm a theist and I do believe in objective morality, right? Even though I granted your worldview for the sake of argument, I have a divine command to destroy everything that you would consider that you hold dear, right? And you, though, have no objection to that.
Yours, I would argue yours is also subjective. You picked that moral framework because you felt that it was better. That's also just your subjective opinion, right? And then if you want to get into, we can get super philosophical into Hume's. Can you get an ought from an is? Who, like, why should it, we could go into a whole God debate if you like. But my point is, just because you get yours from a monster in the sky and you chose subjectively based on your feelings, just like I base my moral preferences on your feelings, it was your feeling that chose your sect of Christianity when your interpretation of divine command, which by the way does not even match most of the other people in your religion. I got a bunch of messages from Christians late after our last discussion about you saying you would institute breeding facilities based on divine command to force people to have children. They were like, I don't know what kind of Christianity that is. That's not my divine command. So one, divine command is highly subjective.
You mean within the purview of a hypothetical?
Because it depends on every single person's interpretation of the divine command. And it's just ultimately based on your feelings as well. And you can't even prove it.
We can grant all of this. Listen, we can still grant all of this and still move into the worldview. And even under your secular worldview of just outcomes based, right? You just are looking at outcomes. I can still demonstrate that the society that I want has better outcomes than the society you want, thus forcing you to concede to my worldview as well. Let's go through it.
Let's get there. No. Let's get there. But I'm not letting you go on this point because you said the debate is over just because I have a subjective worldview.
Well,
and
you don't know it yet, but you're going to find out.
Yours is subjective too. So tell me how that makes you win the debate, because that was your claim. And I'm going to push you on this claim until you give me an answer about how
I've already given it to you
right.
15 times because once we have had you concede that every form of morality is essentially the same and as valid as any other form of morality, and you have no objection to any of it, then if I come in and say, well, I feel like I have a divine command to destroy everything that you hold dear, you have no moral objection to that, and have to consider stop. I just listened to all your spiel.
I have no objective.
Stop. It's my turn. Stop talking.
You're not answering
my turn.
Question.
I'm answering it. I literally I could not be answering it more concisely than this. So now I can say to you, and am saying to you, that under what I consider divine command, if I come in and say, under divine command, I have to destroy everything that you hold dear, you actually have no moral objection to me doing that. Do you understand?
And your moral objection is based on nothing, your subjective preferences as well. So that would mean it's a draw. So if you believe in divine command,
keep saying mine is subjective.
There's no evidence for your divine command, and your divine command is also highly subjective. And then you go, well, since you can't prove yours because you don't get your advice from the same sky friend I get it from, now you lose. You still have the burden of proof to show why your moral framework is right.
Right. So then
because
that would
the only way you can beat me is if your moral framework
what?
Right. So
What's the logical entailment? The logical entailment would then be, if that's the case, then all we're really talking about again is force, right?
And all the force is on my side. So cool. Then I will. Well,
this is interesting. Let's move into this, right? So
if
that's a determination, you can say whatever you want. Doesn't matter. You're just kind of talking. You're not saying anything.
No, because you made a claim, and I'm pushing you on the logic of the claim and the burden of proof, right? Because just because I can't prove my moral framework, which I concede, the only difference between you and me is I'm conceding that mine's subjective and you're not.
Yeah, but I already granted that for the sake of. I literally granted it for the sake of argument. I granted it for the sake of argument.
You granted it for the sake of argument. Then you said that actually you win, and you win on a basis where you didn't grant it for the sake of argument.
Right, because what you're saying is that, well, because if I flip the coin and say, okay, then all I have to do is demonstrate from there that I believe in divine command and objective morality. Now I have a claim of which I can destroy your claim with, because yours is just everything. Stop talking, Jasmine. Stop talking. Let me finish. So again, what ends up happening is this. Once it's flipped, now you can see that all claims that you make are just as subjective as all other claims, and you believe that all of them are just as valid. The distinction is you could be one of these types of atheists who believes that all claims are not equally moral and that all claims are not equally valid. But you, in your stupidity, actually made the bold claim that they're all equal to all other claims. So if that's true,
So
then any fucking thing that I want to do, you can't have an objection to. Doesn't matter what it is.
That's not how logic works. And if we're
It
going to
is
go
how
at the
logic works.
philosophical sophistication that you're at, then I will take the Sam Harris well-being view. The only reason I
Okay.
don't take that is because there are still philosophical premises that aren't met. But where you're arguing from, especially when you say that because I have a quote unquote objective worldview, you didn't grant it, and the debate is already over somehow because yours is subjective and mine is also subjective, at least for the sake of argument. But now that the argument's over, mine's actually not subjective, and I'm telling you that yours is. You now have to prove. You have the burden of proof on showing why
you've already
yours
validated
is
that my
objective
worldview.
and
You've
mine is
already
subjective.
validated my worldview is just as good as yours. That's why.
I didn't. What I'm saying is, you said it's not, though. You have the burden of proof. So
What do you
even
mean?
if I said
I'm
that,
not
and
saying
I
I already
draw,
granted
let's
it.
say I
I
say
already
it's a draw.
granted it. I already
Let's say
granted
we
it,
say
and you say
you
it's just
didn't.
as
You
valid.
granted it just to take it back to
So
make an
then, if
argument that
it's
doesn't
just
make
as
sense.
valid, so then if it's just as valid as your worldview,
So,
what's your
okay,
objection
if I'm
to
saying
it?
it's a draw, then because if our moral, you're saying it's not a draw because it's just as valid. That's not how burden of proof works. This is like logical reasoning.
I
100.
just want you to concede that it's just as valid as your worldview.
If you concede that either your subjective framework is, you have a subjective framework too, or you prove that yours is somehow objective, then you have to concede as well that we're at the same level. You're not at a point above me.
Yeah. So for the point of the argument, I've already done that. For the point of the
But
argument,
then
I've
you
just
took
said
it back to
I'll
say
go
that I
ahead.
lost.
I'll go ahead and grant it, right, for the sake of the argument. But now I
Then
just
don't
need
take
you
it
to
back.
now I just need you to say that both of our worldviews are equal to each other in your mind.
I don't believe in an objective moral framework. I believe yours is subjective and mine is subjective, and you wanted to grant that, but then say you won by not granting it. And if you're going to do that, then you have to prove why yours is objective. If we're starting,
I didn't say anything about objective morality. One more time.
At the basis of philosophical
Why are you not understanding
moral
this?
framework.
Stop.
Why are
you not understanding this?
That is
I've already
exactly how I feel
granted.
about you.
I've already granted it. I came to the ethical purview that I have all by myself. Sees okay, has
But then
nothing
you
to do with.
concede that
Stop,
doesn't mean you
Jasmine. Let
won
me
the
finish,
debate.
Jasmine. Stop talking.
Okay.
Okay. So if I came to this all by my lonesome, absent a murderousness God. Okay. And you claim that these are equally valid. I just need the concession that you believe that the Christian nationalist worldview is just as valid as your worldview. That's it. That's all I'm asking.
If you
for.
concede that you did not already win the debate, then because how would you win the debate? By
Whatever concession yet you want, I'll
Like,
go ahead and make that. But you will concede that mine is just as good as yours, right?
Andrew,
No,
just
I
for
don't concede that it's
clarification,
just
do you
as-
mean? Well, let me actually clarify, Andrew. When you say that, do you mean just morally, or do you mean from a utilitarian perspective too?
What do you mean? From a moral standpoint, there's nothing immoral about what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
There's nothing objectively immoral, I would say, because it's really hard to ground.
So then let's move into what the subjective immorality is.
Okay, sure.
So what would be subjectively immoral about what I'm proposing?
Well, if we're going based on my moral preferences, I think that a lot of outside of the fact that there's no evidence for it, a lot of the policies you purport to believe in, such as in our last discussion, instituting breeding facilities, if 80% of women, you said that if 80% of women were dying during childbirth, that you still believe that they should be forced to have children in breeding facilities if necessary. I believe that is based on my moral preferences, which based on your moral preferences that you pretend come from divine command, even though most other believers don't even think that that's what divine command would say. I would say that that's bad for society. I would say that sacrificing 80% of our women so that we can have babies for whatever reason, so that the future generations can flourish, is bad based on my subjective moral preferences. I also think when you look at the data and you look at the difference between outcomes in secular countries versus our country, that is also, in my subjective opinion, shows that it's worse, but also objective measures of outcome also show that it's worse. Lastly, I would say that our freedoms, as I love America and I love the freedoms that we have, that could be a subjective opinion. If you want to take those freedoms away, I don't think you're just going to have issues from me. I think you're going to have issues from a lot of people, because if you want to destroy America, which is basically what you're saying you want to do, you want to destroy the foundation of it. You want to take away what our founding fathers have built. You want to take away our Constitution, essentially, to institute your subjective worldview. I need you to make an argument for why that should be the case, especially when you have no enforcement. And if you think rights come from enforcement, at the moment, you have nothing. All you have is words and a degenerate porn star that you're arguing with on the internet.
Yeah. So okay, can I move into these points now? Is that
Go for it.
okay, or are you gonna like kind of overwindedly say nothing again? So first and
No, I wasn't
foremost,
saying nothing. But
as
go
we
ahead.
move into the hypothetical, you say that from your subjective worldview of your own personal preferences that I'm wrong.
Just like from your subjective worldview of your preferences, I'm
Okay,
wrong. So
before you
again, it's
do
a
an
draw.
internal critique, answer my question, please.
No, yes. So we're at a draw. That's the answer.
Okay, so the answer, the answer would be yes or no. So are you saying that I'm wrong, that I would put 80% of women rather than have the entire population of the
Yes.
world go
Yes, but not
extinct?
in an objective moral way. And you don't have one either.
Okay,
So
so
again, if you want to go back into
so
this
are you
talk, we can
ever?
go back
I
into
just
this
need you
talk.
to answer the question. That's it.
The
I don't need you to
question,
give me. I don't need you to give me additional bloviating.
I
Just would
answered the question.
appreciate if you would just say yes or no, and I'll do the
Andrew,
same
I
thing
answered
for
the
you.
question.
re-ask the question, please.
So yeah, so just answer yes or no, please. So you're saying, and I want to make sure I get this correct, that from your subjective preferences inside of a hypothetical where it's either the world is going to go extinct or I have to force women to have children, that me forcing them to have children rather than allow the human race to go extinct, that's immoral. That's wrong.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
so
immoral.
all of humanity operate off of the subjective preferences of Jazmen Jafar?
No, just like they shouldn't operate off
So
the
who should
preferences
they
of Andrew Wilson.
operate off of?
I think that's why we have checks and balances. We have a system that we've created with representation. We have 3 branches of government, and we have
So
a
the majority?
constitution that has made this one of the greatest countries on earth. That is a secular constitution that takes freedoms and takes God completely out of it. Our founding fathers did for a reason,
What are we
because we live in a
appealing to for whose morality we're going to use, Jasmine?
well, you're wanting to change the status quo, right?
Who
You
are
want
we
to do
appealing
what you
to,
want to.
Jasmine, for our morality? Jasmine, answer my question,
Who are you
Jasmine.
appealing to?
It's a-
I think we're appealing
let's
to
just
our
say I'm appealing to
institutions.
myself for the purpose of the
Okay.
conversation. I'll just say I'm appealing to myself.
I'm
Who are
appealing
you
to
appealing to
myself.
yourself?
I'm appealing to myself, our institutions, and the best minds in the world, having reasoned, debated the scientific method, empirical evidence. That's who I'm that's who I'm appealing to. Now I want you to tell me who you're appealing to, since I answered
Well,
your
I've
question.
already
You answer mine.
again, right? I'm still inside of your worldview. Happily, I'll just say appealing to me. So if I'm appealing to me and you're appealing to you, who the fuck do we go with?
Me, because I have all the enforcement, which you love, and I have all the institutions on my side. So if you want to change the status quo, you have a lot more work than I do. When I'm saying, hey, I love the foundation of our country, it's good. So I would love for you to give some arguments as to why you want to destroy America
So,
for your
well, you don't
subjective
understand.
worldview.
I'm actually giving you the arguments. You don't even know I am. So ultimately, what you're saying, what it boils down to is might makes right in your worldview.
No, I was appealing to your worldview. I'm saying that what wins in the marketplace of ideas, now, sometimes that's not what I agree with. Sometimes I disagree with the decisions the Supreme Court makes. Sometimes I make those disagreements, but we have a social contract when we live in this country, and I don't think you're violating it by advocating for your position. Now, if you want to take guns and start shooting people, I don't think that's you.
This does
But
not answer
sometimes
to
that's
the question at all. If you have a
what's
subjective set of stated preferences and appeal to yourself for what is moral, and I do the same and appeal to myself for what is moral, what is the threshold breaker for how we are going to make the determination of what we're going to do, Jasmine?
I think then at that point, because we're too random, we're two single individuals, then we look at the framework we already exist in and the foundation of the country we already exist in. And the foundation of the country we already exist in, America, which a lot
Well,
of
then
people
what
are
if the
proud of this
foundation of the
country for
country
this.
is that we march people up on top of a pyramid and we cut their heart out and we sacrifice it to the sun god, Jasmine?
That is subjectively, I would think that's wrong. Now, one of the reasons, like I said in my
How would
opening,
you
I'm
know
proud
that
to
that
live
was
in this
wrong? You said
country.
that's the threshold breaker. The threshold breaker is to look at your institutions and to look at your society.
No,
And that's
I
the
said the
threshold breaker for what's
for this
moral.
debate, the threshold breaker for this debate, the threshold
For this
breaker
debate,
for moral
for
framework
the
on which
purpose of
moral
this
framework
debate, you
prevent.
said the
There is no,
threshold
there
breaker.
is, if we're going, no, I would, because the debate is which one's better for society. So I was taking it by that question. If we're just going to go which one's right morally, then it's a draw. There is
No,
no
I'm
right.
asking
There's no right
you,
for you either.
asking you this question again. One more
Mhm.
time, since you just avoid it like the plague.
I feel like I've
If
answered it.
you're claiming, you make the claim, hey, all of my morals come from my own subjective preferences and nothing else, and so do yours. And I say, okay, I'll grant that and agree with it. We have an argument about what we should do with society. How do we make the determination as to which ones we go with, Jasmine?
Okay, well then, like I said, then I think we should go to outcomes. And I just demonstrated, I have a huge paper here, I can send it to you, on all of the outcomes that are better in a secular nation over a nation that isn't secular. The second thing I say
Okay.
we would do is
So
we would
then,
look at the people and what they
right.
want. In our country, in the United States of America, we
So hang
value
on,
the
I just
Constitution.
need to clarify a couple things. So if we're going to go with outcomes, right? Outcomes are what we're going to move to in order to
That's not the only
determine
thing. I was
what is the
trying
other
to give
thing.
you others. I said outcomes, and we also need to look at what the people, like what the marketplace of ideas. That's why we have freedom of speech in this, because then it allows someone like you who wants to topple America to tell me why you want to topple something that's so valuable to the vast majority of people in this country.
Yeah,
So I
but
would
that would
like
be
to hear your
outcomes again.
arguments as to why.
That would be
What?
outcomes again.
If it's outcomes again, then it's outcomes again. But there's also, I
So if
think,
it's
a
just
lot of people.
outcomes,
No,
so
it's not just
outcomes are what we're
outcomes.
looking
It's
at,
not
right?
just outcomes.
Then why would
Because
you
the
value
people,
it? Then why would you
the
value
people
it?
in this country, the people in this country, most of them share the same subjective preference that I have about the importance of the freedoms that we share, and they love America for those freedoms. So you also have that hurdle to go after. You may be able to go to a different country and say, hey, look at these outcomes. I
You
may be
think
able to
most
go
of
to
the
the
people
American
inside of
people.
the United
I may
States
be
have
able
a
to go into
subjective morality?
I think most of the people in the United States have a subjective morality, because I think everyone has a subjective morality. And I think that their preferences
Oh,
align with the fact that we have certain freedoms. And those freedoms actually, in some cases, can overpower outcomes, like in the gun example. While
Jasmine,
guns definitely have negative outcomes, I think most people in America would say that we still want to keep this freedom because our moral subjective preference is that it is, but that is the majority
well,
of
then that
people. And
would
that
be a
also
better
aligns.
I
outcome.
want to really
Yeah,
quickly
well, hang on. We're
Hang
getting
on.
somewhere. We're getting somewhere. We're
I
getting
know. I'm
somewhere.
just going to literally ask one question. I just want to clarify
You're
this.
fucking up the flow, man. Let me just finish the question.
Fortunately, it's my chance. I can do whatever the fuck I want. So, Jasmine, I just want to clarify your second point. So, so you're basically saying that in addition to outcomes, the other metric that we would look at is the popularity of people's preferences, right?
Yes.
Okay.
In a democratic society, that's why we have a democracy, and I think a democracy is good. So yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
Into
keep
it.
going, Andrew.
Okay, so anyway, all of these preferences that you're pointing to are outcomes. So if you say like, hey, society has determined that even though maybe there's like some negative outcomes, they gain more from owning guns than they don't gain from owning guns, that would still be an outcome. That would be a
Sure,
determination of
but
outcome. So everything that
in
you're
a way,
really
but it's a
after is a
different kind of
determination
outcome.
of outcome. So it's all outcomes based. So why didn't you start with the moral objection of outcomes? That would have been far better for you to do.
Well,
So
because
if it's just
I was taking critique of you started it with the
yeah, so
moral thing.
if
I
it's
actually,
just
in my opener, you went through this whole thing about rights and subjectivism. That's
yeah.
why I went there. My opener actually was about the foundation, about freedom, and about outcomes, and then you switched the debate
So
over here. Now you're complaining about
if it's just outcomes based, then we'll move into the outcomes base of this from your purview. So now we understand at least what it is that you value. You really just value outcomes. So if that's
I value
true,
outcomes and democracy, yes.
yeah, okay,
But I
got
think
it. That
our
because you think it
outcomes
leads to the better
influence
outcome. Because you think it leads to the better outcome. That's why. So you're a
democracy leads to a better
utilitarian.
outcome. So yeah, you can take
Yeah.
everything back down to that, just like you can take everything back down to preferences and like completely eliminate even free will with this. So I don't know
Well,
what
it's
you're trying
not
to do here, how
preference because it's not
philosophically
really
sophisticated you want to get.
preference based if you actually are valuing outcomes. It's not really just preference based because you think outcomes are what we should be valuing, not Jazmen Jafar's personal preferences,
But also
right?
the moral preferences of the majority of the people in a democratically free in a
Because you
democratic
think
and free
that leads to
society.
better outcome, Jasmine?
Yes, and everything I
Okay,
do
well, then
also
it's
has because I
outcomes. It's
believe
all
in better
just
outcomes. My
evaluation of
moral subjective
outcomes.
framework also, but I want to make sure
It's
just
all
to note
just
for the audience
outcomes.
that outcomes can also mean, because like the example I gave, having guns in this country may lead to worse objective outcomes in the amount of deaths, etc. But I think, and this part you're right, that the outcome of keeping it matches the moral preference and matches the viewpoints of most people in our democracy. And so therefore that outweighs that negative outcome, which is also a different way of looking at outcomes.
Okay,
So yeah.
great. Okay, so now that we've got this established, finally understand what your actual moral framework is, I'm going to ask you this question again, if you don't mind. Do you know who Leonid Radvinsky is?
No.
Okay, he is the founder, he's the owner of OnlyFans. Okay, that's who he is. And he made over $300 million last year. Okay, he managed to
Okay.
pay himself $1 million a day in 2022 via dividends, right? In this particular case, would you consider yourself to be a prostitute and him your pimp?
If it's like if we want to really get down to it, sure, I keep 80%, he keeps 20%. Would you consider Patreon or YouTube, like if Patreon's taking 20% or if Substack's taking 20% of your income, are they your pimp and you're a prostitute? Except
Well,
for
no,
mine is
because
selling
there's no
sex.
prostitution. So,
Because it's not sex. If you want to say
yeah,
that just
sex is
because mine is
prostitution.
sex
That's correct.
and Patreon isn't, then sure. Yeah.
Okay, so right, so you're a prostitute. This is your pimp. Can you tell me why that's a better outcome for a person, better utility for a person than being a mother of 3 in a loving home?
I never said it's better, but I would say that it's better to live in a society that grants people freedoms. We have certain civil liberties, and one of those is the determination in what kind of occupation we want to have and what's best suited for us. So for me, I
And
enjoy
all
this. I
rights
make a ton
and
of
all
money doing this.
rights are all these rights that you are alluding to. All of them have limitations which are placed on them in lieu of responsibility and duty. Correct?
What do you mean? Can you
Well,
explain
for an
that? Expand on that
example, if
further?
you look at the Second Amendment, right? The fight over the Second Amendment is what responsibility people have with gun ownership. Correct?
True.
Same
And I
fight
think
over
we
the
have a
First Amendment, right?
responsibility. Yeah, we also have, yeah, so in
Mhm.
that case, yeah, we have a responsibility with OnlyFans to make sure we don't have like children doing what I'm doing, and there should be certain regulations. I do pay my taxes. I'm a 1099 employee for the IRS.
Mhm.
So yeah, I do think regulations are good.
So if the outcomes here, which you're looking at, if you want to make the claim that the outcome is good for a woman, right? You should be maximizing the outcomes, correct? So how can you
Yeah.
explain how it maximizes utility? The outcomes are better for society. From my worldview, to say no more prostitution, I want to see more women at home with their children raising their families versus being prostitutes on the internet. Can you tell me why it is that your worldview maximizes the outcomes and mine doesn't?
So I can tell you many reasons, one of which is, again, just making the civil liberties argument that a society is better overall when people are allowed the freedoms to live lives that are conducive to their own happiness. But also, if you look at even countries that criminalize this versus countries that don't, even when it comes to in-person prostitution, decrim versus criminalizing, the outcomes tend to be actually better, like in New Zealand for decriminalizing sex work. So we can even get into that if you like.
Great. So in 2012, a study was published by Harvard Law Education, which investigated the effect of legalized prostitution on human trafficking inflows into high income countries, which we would consider this to be. The research, as it goes through, shows something remarkable, such as the criminalization of prostitution in Sweden resulted in the shrinking of the prostitution market and the decline of human trafficking inflows. Cross-country comparisons of Sweden with Denmark, where prostitution is decriminalized, and Germany, expanded legalization of prostitution, and are consistent with the quantitative analysis showing that trafficking inflows decreased with criminalization and increased with legalization. That's a terrible fucking outcome.
No,
Isn't it,
so
Jasmine?
first of
That's a
all,
terrible
First of all,
outcome.
I have studies where I can pull up two that counter that, especially when we look at decrim versus the Nordic model. This is like my
Then
area.
show them
Like
to
I know
me.
this.
Then show them
Okay,
to
for
me.
sure. And then also in the meantime, there's Sesta Fosta. So Sesta Fosta was passed in 2017 or 18 by Trump in order to curb trafficking, human trafficking, taking down back pages by making basically cutting down the protections afforded by Section 230 of the Communications Act, which would make platforms liable for facilitating prostitution, which took down things like Backpage, which made our job, online sex workers, a lot harder. And look up the effects of that. All it did was make human trafficking
Well, I don't need
worse.
to look them up. You can just send it to me, but try to understand the entailment here is that at least you're going to have to concede that there's some human trafficking, which is an entailment of prostitution in general, but there is no entailment of human trafficking from being a stay-at-home mom who takes care of her children. Why
Wait,
would
I'm
that not
talking
be
about.
why would that not be the outcome that since I want to see that outcome in society and not prostitution, it seems like I have a much better moral leg to stand on than you do from your own worldview.
No, because one, I'll pull up the stats now. We can go through them because I'm going to talk about Sesta Fosta and those effects, and we'll talk about the difference, the decrim, which is why all of the major human rights organizations, all of them, when they looked at all this data, they also are pro decrim. So even though you may find one study here or there, that doesn't negate all the other studies that there is. And two, I would say that even like consensual sex work is different than human trafficking. Me being
They did a quantitative they did a quantitative analysis.
Okay.
They took a ton of different studies in order to make these
Okay.
types of comparisons. That's one.
All
But
right.
two, the entailment here is that even, let's just say, even if there was less human trafficking by the legalization of the prostitution than the decriminalization of the prostitution, if I want zero prostitution and there's no entailment of any trafficking by me doing that, how's that not a better outcome for society, Jazmen?
Wait, what? Can you repeat your question?
Yes. If there's an entailment of human trafficking, regardless of the criminalization, decriminalized or criminalized, and I want to eliminate it altogether. So regardless of the criminalization or decriminalization, it's just gone, right? We eliminate prostitution altogether. The entailment there is, and we move towards the outcome of having women stay at home and raise their kids. Why isn't that better for society? Why?
It's because you're taking away people's freedoms, the freedom of people like me
The
to do
freedom to be
consensual
a
sex work,
degenerate.
and
The
it's
freedom
not
of you to be a
incorporated in this
degenerate.
case. Yeah.
And
We
that's
should have
all
the
you
freedom
care
to be a
about. All
degenerate.
you care about is the freedom to be a degenerate. You don't want
I
expanded
care about
freedoms
freedoms
and
in
rights
general. I
so
care
that
about
people
your
can help
freedom. I care
anybody.
about your freedom to own a gun. Is that
No,
me
you
caring
don't. You
about
don't give a shit about that. You don't care about
I
my
do.
freedom to own a gun. You care
I
about
literally
one
wrote
thing.
one of my papers in law school about how I actually think that the Second Amendment is really important, and I would stand up for your right to have a gun. So how is every single freedom, and
What
I
about,
believe in free
okay,
speech,
well, Jazmen, if
all
you'd
of
stand
the
up for my
freedoms
right
that
to
I
have a
alluded to in
gun,
the
do
beginning
you
of this?
stand up for my right to have a gun with no background check?
No.
No. So then shut up. You don't care about my right to own a gun. All you care
Yes,
about,
I do. I still
all
think
you
you have a
care
right
about,
to own it.
all you
That
care
doesn't
about
mean
is
I
the
just am
limitation.
pro-regulation, just
What
like
you
I'm
care
pro-First
about,
Amendment, even though I don't
what
believe in
you
direct
care
threats
about
of
is the
violence or
duties.
doxing.
Nope. What you care about is the duties which are entailed with the ownership of the gun, not the right to own it. The duty
No, the right
and the
to own it goes
responsibility
hand
is
in
what you
hand
care
with the
about.
duty.
Right.
right
Okay.
goes-
So if that's true, what we're quibbling about is not whether or not I have a right to own a gun, because you think I don't. You think I have a responsibility when I have a gun, and you'll give me one if I adhere to those responsibilities. That's what you're actually saying.
No, I think you have a right to the freedom of speech, but that has limits. Just like you have the right to own a gun, but there are limits. So I like our free speech doctrine right now. Again, I know you didn't go to law
Then
school,
what
so I
you're
don't wanna boggle you down
actually,
with
then
law,
what you're
but there
actually
are certain
attacking.
things. There are certain things that aren't covered by that right. The First Amendment does not cover direct incitements of violence. It doesn't cover even
Right.
obscenity. That
So
one I almost disagree
so
with.
in my opening
But
statement,
that
I
doesn't mean that I
laid
only
this
care
out,
about the
Jazmen.
duty.
In
I
the
also care
opening
about
statement, I laid this out. It's not really a
Okay.
right then. What it is an associative of duties and responsibilities that we're arguing about, which means that there
The
is no
reason we're
real.
arguing
Hang on,
about
stop,
duties and
Jazmen.
responsibilities
There
is
is
because
no
we have a
right. There is no right. If there was a right,
So,
if there was a right, how could you take it away from somebody when they go to
what is
prison?
the function of
Can
the first? What is
prisoners
the
have a
function
gun?
of our
Can
Constitution?
prisoners
Can you
have
All
a
right,
gun?
we need to go one at a time. One at a time. One at a time. Let's.
Okay,
What
so
is
let
the
me
function of the
ask you:
Constitution?
One at a time.
Can prisoners have a gun?
I think it would depend, and it depends on the state. And
No,
not
prisoners.
I meant, no.
Why can't they have a gun?
Because that's one of the regulations and the restrictions we
Because
place
they-
on the Second Amendment.
Because there's no
But
actual
on your
right
Second
if you can
Amendment
take it
right
away.
to have a gun.
So it's an
doesn't mean
entitlement.
right. A
so,
right doesn't
so
mean.
it's an entitlement that you can take away, right?
I have a question. If a right has limitations on it, does that make it not a right? Are the only rights ones that
Yes.
have no limitations on
Yeah.
them?
So I would
disagree
argue
with
that what a
vehemently.
right is actually
And so
is
would our
just
Supreme Court.
what a right is actually is an entitlement, and that the entitlement is subject to duties and responsibilities. It's not actually a right. And most of the rights
are agreed upon by humans and enforced by society.
Rights
Okay.
are entitlements which people have that you claim that people have, but you can take them away whenever you choose to. It's not really a right.
It's not whenever you choose to, Andrew, because if it was
It
whenever
is
we
when you
chose
choose
to, you
to.
wouldn't be sitting on the internet fighting with me. You would be living the life you want. You have no way right now to stop me.
Unless
you can't
there's a
take away my
lockdown.
right
Unless
to
there's a
make millions
lockdown.
of dollars on OnlyFans.
Yes,
How
you
are you gonna
can.
stop me?
The president could literally come out and take away your rights tomorrow via an executive order and declare martial law and suspend all rights.
Yeah, good luck
Yeah,
with that. There's a reason
but
that
he
hasn't
can.
happened this whole time.
No, it
What can
has.
you-
It has happened. There has been martial law in the United States. What are you talking about?
Okay, so you're saying that basically I don't have a right now, and you can be the person that can judge that, because you saying that if we go through this basically a revolution, because if that happened, especially in recent history over something like OnlyFans, I think you're very deluded on likelihoods of things happening.
Did you have a right to do pornography before it became the law that you could do pornography?
I think I had the right to do pornography before before a law came that prohibited me from doing pornography. So
And
how
what?
laws and rights
And so
work,
that
if you have them,
so
until there is something
so
that
then
tells
it's
you that
so
you
then
can't.
don't cite the Supreme Court and things like this then as an affirmation for why you're correct that you have such a right when you were
No,
not allowed to do porn just what 50 years ago wasn't even legal for you to have the type of
there wasn't the
society
internet 50
where you
years
could
ago.
have that kind of pornography. Well, not even nudie magazines, things like that. There's heavy restrictions on all of it. There was times in American history where it was completely
Do you know what
outlawed.
the obscenity
Let me
doctrine actually
finish. Let me
is?
finish. Let me finish. Let me finish. So
That's not
again,
true.
there have been doctrines where pornography was completely eradicated from American society. So I don't know what are you saying though. What I want you to say, one way or the other, is you believe that a woman doing pornography is a basic human right absent law.
Our obscenity doctrine always had a reference to the community standard, which is why when pornography became a thing and people started doing it on the internet, even if simple like places were like, oh, you can't do it in the city. I've went through the whole obscenity doctrine. You can't have a billboard across a movie theater where people are driving because of whatever reason. At the end of the day, based on community standards, which is why the internet, because if you're going to places to find porn, it would fit that community standard. So it wouldn't be a violation. And the
That
reason I
has
brought up
nothing
the
to do with what
Supreme
I'm
Court in
talking
the
about.
first place, no, because I'm responding to you. You can't just say this whole thing, ask a question, and when I'm responding to the things before the question,
Yeah,
be
but I'd like you
it's
to answer
irrelevant.
to
It's
the
not
actual
irrelevant. It's
question.
relevant to what you just said. In the last 5
Well, how's it
seconds, you
relevant?
told me, why did you bring up the Supreme Court? I'm telling you, because you said rights are only rights if they have no restrictions. And my whole point is we have rights in our Constitution that are then interpreted. Now, you're right. That interpretation could change. That interpretation could change tomorrow. I'm
Yeah,
not
but did you
disagreeing
have
with
a
that.
right before they interpreted it as a right is my question.
Yes, until something usually is outlawed, you have a right.
Okay, so you
You
think
have to
that
be breaking a
well,
law
when
in
it
order.
was outlawed, do you still think that you had a basic human right to do pornography even when it was outlawed to do pornography?
I would say with my moral subjective preference, yes, but I didn't have a right in this country to do
And what
pornography.
made it a right to do that?
My subjective moral framework is
Because
that
you
as long
wanted
as
it, right? Because you wanted it.
because be just like I don't want you to have guns at all, but I still believe in that principle. My principle is
Is
that
that
people
you
should
want?
have the freedom to purchase and sell sex
Hmm.
between two consenting adults. That is the principle that I always had, even before I did porn. This was, if you asked me 5 years ago when I was just in law school, I would have said the same thing. Okay, it's
So,
not because
so,
it's
so then pornography is a basic human right by your estimation.
being able to sell and purchase sex. I think should be. Yeah.
Okay, but this conflicts with your outcomes-based society and duty unless you
No,
can
it
construct,
doesn't.
then tell me how it is that the outcomes for this world that you postulate, where you can be a prostitute whenever you so choose, and you can essentially devalue yourself in every way possible, which leads to non-reproductive ends most of the time, by the way. How could it possibly be that that society's outcomes are going to be better than the one that I advocate for,
So
where this is outlawed and instead we focus on the family unit? How is
okay,
my society worse?
so let me ask you this. If we just go research for research right now, if you put up your research and I send you research, if are you okay then with going with whichever outcome or whichever research is more heavily swayed in one direction? Because it seems like you are.
Yeah,
Is that okay with
I
you?
don't even understand. Can you answer this question?
What's the question?
Okay, so just listen to me, okay? And I'll give you plenty of time to respond. We could actually have productive conversation, but
I don't think so.
listen to what I'm actually saying to you. The entailment, no matter what, of prostitution is going to lead to worse outcomes. No matter what. It's going to lead
No.
no matter what, it's going to lead to at least some
And
kind of
what's your
human,
evidence for that?
because it's no matter where you have prostitution, you have human trafficking. No matter where it's legal.
Even in places where prostitution is illegal, though, you have human trafficking.
Okay, but the distinction is that you think that it's a human right to do this, and I do not. So I would move towards a world where no prostitution even happened anymore. That would be the ultimate.
Well,
Stop. That would be the ultimate goal of my world. Would be to get rid of it altogether, whereas the ultimate goal of your world would not be. So if the ultimate goal that I had, which was achieved, was that there was no more prostitution, how would that be a worse world than the one I postulate, which is there is no prostitution and moms. We focus on families and moms.
Your world. So then if you're going to go with ideal world and make it completely unrealistic, because actually the countries that ban it have a lot of both prostitution and trafficking. But if we're just going to go with ideals, and I can make up my own ideal and say consensual sex work is okay, but human trafficking doesn't exist in my ideal worldview. What kind of fucking hypothetical is this? We can just make up
nope,
we
it
can
can't.
just make up worlds.
It actually can't. So under your worldview, if there's an entailment, there is an entailment that if prostitution is a human right, which is what you've got them saying it is. This is a human right. It's a right for everybody to do this sex work, right? You consider this to be a fundamental right, even absent law,
With
law.
Consenting adults.
So we can't even work towards a world where you could outlaw this, even knowing the human trafficking component and the bad outcomes to it, because you consider it a basic human right. The distinction is I don't. My world then becomes possible and yours does not.
No, your world. Okay, I just want to note this for the audience. Andrew thinks you can absolutely, in his world, eliminate all prostitution and human trafficking. If we're going to go that
tell me the
delusional,
contradiction.
Just like prohibition and all of the
tell
things,
me the
those
contradiction.
The war on drugs that worked out so
tell
well.
me the contradiction.
Huh?
Tell me the logical contradiction. I just told you yours. Tell me mine.
The logical contradiction is that you're saying that your worldview of this hypothetical world where we get rid of prostitution is viable, but my worldview that we get rid of
I'm saying that I'm saying mine's possible. Yours isn't, because you believe that prostitution is a human right. So you could never actually move towards a world absent prostitution, and entailment of legal or illegal prostitution is going to be human trafficking. Whereas I say we could move towards a world where you did not have any type of prostitution whatsoever due to the virtues of society.
I think we can.
And so this problem's eliminated.
I think we can move towards a world while keeping and decriminalizing consenting adults from prostitution and human trafficking. Your argument hinges on human trafficking and consensual sex work being linked inextricably. That we can't put resources into stopping. It's not, though. It's not. And Sesta Fosta and the outcomes of Sesta Fosta are just one example of, just like we had with the war on drugs, just like prohibition, that sometimes outlawing something doesn't get rid of the problem. So for you to say that and I like how this is ideal too. So in your ideal worldview, we can get rid of prostitution and there will be no sex trafficking. But in my worldview, where I'm saying in my ideal world, we can keep consensual sex work, but put our resources into stopping non-consensual sex work. That's impossible and isn't even logically sound.
Unless you don't believe, then the only bullet you would have to bite here is to say that you believe that you can enter into some kind of paradigm where sex work, the way that it is right now, is a human right and everybody can practice it, but that you also believe that there'll be no human trafficking associated with it.
I don't think that's realistic, nor do I think it's realistic to be able to eliminate it by trying to decriminalize it everywhere.
So then you do believe that an entailment of prostitution is going to be human trafficking.
I think human trafficking is an entailment of life. That's the difference between you and me.
It's an entailment of life?
Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to extract.
We can't even move towards a world without it because it's just an entailment of life.
Can't move towards a view. I said I don't believe it's realistic that the outcome is going to end with zero trafficking, but that doesn't mean I don't believe we should move towards that.
But you do believe.
You are literally a walking logical fallacy, Andrew.
What's the fallacy? Give me the fallacy.
Yours. Okay, so you're saying
what's the fallacy? What's the fallacy? Tell me the fallacy, Jasmine.
The fallacy is also the burden of proof one.
What's the fallacy, Jasmine?
I just gave it to you.
That's the burden of proof fallacy. The burden. What's the fallacy?
Yes, it is because you take yours as just true. You're like, oh yeah, I can work to a world where we just eliminate it all, but you can't. And I'm like, well, what's your reasoning for that? What's the proof? Oh, I can't prove it because you can't prove yours. That's a fallacy.
Not what I said. What's the fallacy that I stated?
It's possible.
What's the fallacy or contradiction?
What? That's the
contradiction. What's the fallacy or contradiction? There's no contradiction. There's no fallacy.
There is
name the fallacy.
Everybody look up burden of proof fallacy. He's basically saying he doesn't have to prove why his is right and mine is wrong.
I've already proven it. Because
what do you mean?
Because you've already claimed now multiple times that an entailment, even just an entailment of any type of prostitution, is going to lead to at least some kind of human trafficking. Whereas
And
I
I believe
propose
all
what
criminalization is also going to lead to human trafficking. So the difference between you and me is
so
only
wait
that you think that
so
it can
then
be
legal so
completely
then we
eliminated,
must so
and
then we
I don't
must
think it
legalize
can.
it.
That doesn't mean that you
So then
what?
we
I
have
think
to legalize it.
decriminalizing. No, we're not legalizing human trafficking. You need to stop conflating human trafficking
I
with
didn't say
something
human
I do, like
trafficking. We're
OnlyFans.
legalizing prostitution, right?
Legalizing prostitution, if you don't know the difference between consensual adults engaging in sex work and someone being forced or trafficked, that's on you. But
Right,
there
but
are
what the
plenty of
entailment
measures we
is
can take.
the entailment that you're saying though is that all forms of degeneracy must be legalized and decriminalized because people are going to do them anyway, right? So
No, that's not what I'm
isn't that what
saying.
you're
What I'm
saying?
saying is that no, I'm saying that we have certain rights and liberties, and
Mhm.
trafficking is something that happens, but it happens also in places where it's completely not a right. Therefore, maybe trafficking is a separate issue from consensual sex work like OnlyFans. OnlyFans is really hard to traffic someone on OnlyFans. You have to have a bank account that goes in your name. You need to have a consenting, you need to send in your ID, you need to be taxed by the IRS, you need to be confirmed by the IRS. So can you explain to me how something like OnlyFans is contributing to human trafficking when countries that have it banned have just as much human trafficking? I don't understand this argument.
Prove that the countries that have it banned have just as much human trafficking as the countries which do not have it banned. I would
Yeah,
like to
Jasmine, I
actually
think
see
we should
that.
go ahead and do that because you've said that a few times and Andrew seems to disagree with that. So if you can pull that up, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, and in the meantime, I want Andrew to contend with if we're looking at outcomes, why the
Mhm.
secular countries tend to have better outcomes, and I
They
can
don't.
link you that because I already
How
have
about
that
let's
already
talk
pulled
about the
up.
fact that women suffer from higher rates of mental illness, and let's talk about the maternal death
Wait,
rates, which
wait,
leads
wait.
into
Let's
topic 2.
Okay,
Hang
I'm
on, you
putting
want
this
me to
in the
give you the
chat.
reasons for the outcomes, right? The outcome
Well,
distinctions?
give me the reason for it then. Tell
Well,
me why the
okay, I'm
murder
trying
rates are
to, but
higher.
you have to stop talking because as soon as I
Go
launched
for it.
into
Tell
it, you
me
cut
why.
me off immediately. So let's talk about
Just like
this.
you
Let's
always
get
do to
into
me.
the fact that the Western nations cannot reproduce their own populations. They can't do it. The birth rates are all on the decline. Every single Western nation cannot reproduce itself and must instead focus on the theist nations to pull in immigrants to replace their own domestic populations. That's one. That's the
Okay,
So,
first
so
argument.
so we're gonna
re-
forget the infant mortality, the higher rates of crime, all of those things. And right now, okay, I just pulled up
I'm just
the
trying to
world's
focus
worst.
on one at a time
wait,
here.
guys, real quick. So this is Jasmine, what you sent me. So where do you want me to go?
So can you open the PDF, or do you guys not have access to it because you don't have an institution? I
I
just want to
don't
make sure
have.
you can access
I
it.
don't. I don't have an institution. I can see the abstract, but that's about it.
Okay, should I share my screen then, or how does that
That'll
work?
probably be better. Yeah, if you have access.
Okay,
This just
not
gives
the
the
best.
rough summary, but doesn't actually talk about like why.
Okay, how
Just hit.
So in any case, kind of moving into this, as you're looking
But also
for
I also want to
whatever it
quickly
is you
point out
want,
that if you look up the
can we
countries
start with
with the
my first
highest rates of
point to
human
answer to the
trafficking.
question? Stop moving the goalpost. Can we start with the first point, which
No,
was
I'm not
that you
moving the
just
goalpost.
asked me?
Alex told
You
us to go into
literally just
outcomes, and then
and
you
we
just
just
don't
did.
let
I
me.
just gave you an outcome, and I want you to contend
But
with
you
it.
just ignored. So I gave you like 20 outcomes. You're saying let's ignore all that and focus on your outcome. How come you have that kind of
I'm
authority in this
happy.
debate?
You just told me to give you one, and I did.
No, I'm saying what is your response to my outcomes? All those outcomes that I listed. I'm about to share my screen so that we can see more of them.
Yeah, okay, but
And we can go through
can we start with our negative? So I have a different view. First of all, what is good to you? It's just based
Wait. No,
around
no, 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 no. We were gonna go into you guys. Do you guys not want to go into outcomes now? It seems like he doesn't want me to share my screen. It
this
seems like
is I don't
that
care
is
if
No,
you
wait. I
share the
think.
screen.
Wait, hang on, Andrew. Like, let's definitely talk about
Yeah.
that. But let's first really quickly because I did ask her to pull up the data that she referenced several times.
Yeah.
So let's let her really quickly pull up that data, and then that will be the next point of discussion, which is what you
Okay.
were saying.
Okay, that's fine, but I'd also
Okay.
like her to contend with mine. So can we do this
Yeah, for
fair
sure.
and do it point by
Yeah.
point? So I'll go
Yeah.
after one of hers, she goes after one of mine.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Otherwise, we end up with a mass gish gallop.
Let's let her just show the data that she says she has, and after that, you can get into your point.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Is it happening?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a study that is done. Let me see if I can. Sorry, I'm really bad with like scrolling and all that.
What are their metrics for well-being first?
Well, here are all of the sources, but as
What
I
are the?
said,
I just want to know what the metrics are for well-being.
Okay, let's find
Just
the
hit Control
metric.
F and go to well-being. Type in well-being. Let's see what the metrics are for it.
Graphics. Control F, you said? Okay, wait. Let's go to. I want to start going into like, okay, criminality and moral conduct. So this would be one of my outcomes for well-being. So although, let's see what it says for criminality and
So
well-being.
they're
Yeah,
right,
okay.
life satisfaction and well-being.
Okay. All right. This is just about religious people in general. I'm trying to get to the part where it's talking about
Yeah, it says
secular
life
countries.
satisfaction and well-being right there.
Okay. So this is about religiousness, and I think this is individual. I'm trying to get to like outcomes. So let's see. We're looking at, maybe it's going into both. Children. Okay, let's see. Let me just read this all.
So here's
But when it comes to
criminality.
more serious, after all, so wait. Yeah, but we find the opposite. Murder rates are actually lower in more secular
This
nations
doesn't
and higher
answer
in
to
more.
the question for what they consider well-being to be. I need to know what their metrics are for well-being.
Okay, so let's talk about me. So I think higher murder
Why
is
does that? I
bad.
don't
Okay.
care about what your preferences
Well,
are. You're
hang
showing
on,
me
hang
a
on.
study.
Well,
She
okay,
said
Peter,
she
murder rates are
bullshit. You're
lower
showing
in
a
more
study.
secular nations.
You're
Hang on,
showing
hang
a
on.
study. I want to know what their metrics for well-being are in the study.
Okay, so this
that's a
one,
fair
so this is not
question.
about
Okay,
metrics
go
for
ahead.
well-being. This is just about murder rates. Okay, can we
Really?
talk about just
Scroll up.
murder rates?
Scroll up. Because it literally says metrics for well-being in the study right at the title. Scroll up.
Okay.
Scroll up.
But that doesn't.
Scroll
Okay, I
up.
just have to go all the way back down. Then.
Atheism, secularity, or secularity and well-being. So what are the metrics for well-being?
Okay, I'm talking about well-being. I'm talking about let's look at outcomes. Do you want to read this whole thing? Fine. Let's stay here and read 23 pages. This is what Andrew wants to do,
That's
guys. Andrew wants to
irrelevant.
stay here and read 23.
No,
Yes,
it's irrelevant.
It is
I just want to know what the
just told
metrics
you
for the well-being in
murder
the study are.
Whatever the study thinks well-being is, the murder rates
Then I need to know what those
Okay, wait,
are.
stop. Both of you, stop. Okay, let's go one thing at a time. So I think you asked a fair question, Andrew, right? But she was trying to make an argument actually about murder rate because
but
saying,
listen.
Oh, wait, hang on.
Right,
Because what she's saying is that in her worldview, murder rate directly ties into outcomes.
But how do we know that her subjective metrics?
Hang on.
All right.
What she's trying to argue is that in her worldview, murder rate, which I think is a pretty reasonable position, is tied into how good a society's doing. So let's just let her really quickly read that one thing, and then we'll get straight to well-being, which is the next thing that you want to talk about.
Okay,
Yeah,
but I need to make an objection here, just briefly, and then you can do whatever the hell you want.
Because he doesn't want to talk about this.
The objection that I have
Well,
here is that you're asking me to do is say whatever this study says based on her whatever she thinks is well-being may not be what the study is actually claiming well-being
but this isn't a study. This is a compilation of research. This isn't even, so the top of it, it's like, okay,
then
on
tell me
criminality,
what they mean by well-being. I need to know that.
This has nothing to do. So take this. Whatever the study says about well-being, there's no conclusion here about well-being. Right now, what I'm telling you is not a conclusion about well-being.
Then how do I know it's well-being? Then how do I know it's well-being?
It's a conclusion about murder rates. So if you're making the argument that murder rates don't associate with well-being, sure. But I'm making the argument, and the audience can decide for themselves: do lower murder rates contribute to well-being? It doesn't matter what the paper says it does, or you say it does, or I say it does. The stat I'm reading right now is about murder rates alone. Then if you want to say that murder rates don't contribute to well-being, go for it. I'm going to say that they do.
Jazmen,
so murder rates are
okay,
actually,
but Jazmen, I'm going to have to raise this.
Read it.
I'm going to have to raise this.
I'm
going to have to raise this too, which is that murder is an unjustified taking of lives, as you know. So the criteria for what they consider a murder to be, which would probably be under well-being, would be important for me to know as well.
Okay, well, so its murder rates are actually lower and more secular. If you want to say that the religious nations where there's higher murder is all justified murder, go for it. But murder rates are actually lower
I
in more
don't know,
secular
because how
nations
would I
and
know?
higher
I
in more
don't know.
religious.
Just
The
one second.
citation is right there. The citation is right there. You can look up the countries and look at why they murder people to come with your conclusion. You're really reaching here. And within America, the states that have the highest murders tend to be highly religious, such as Louisiana and Alabama. But the states with the lowest murder rates tend to be among the least religious in the country, such as Vermont and Oregon.
Yeah,
We
but if
can go
this is
down on
not
every
okay.
metric that
Okay.
this is
Well, let's
saying.
start with the first one
So-
then.
So
How do we
so-
know? How do we know that this isn't a correlatory rather than, if it's not a study? How do we know that this isn't just a correlatory?
Oh, it could be, but I'm saying
Well, then I don't
secularism
care.
is
Well, then I don't
correlated with
care.
lower murder rates. I'm okay with that. I'm not saying secularism causes. I'm not saying religious people are
Well, then if it
murdering
doesn't
more people
cause
because they're
it,
religious.
and there could be a false correlation, then why should I care?
there's an answer to Andrew's question right at the bottom. So, and yet international comparisons. Scroll a little bit down so we can read that. It's at the very bottom. I see it basically. I think that's the answer to the question he was asking earlier.
Where? The bottom
So
of what?
no, wait, leave it right there. Okay, so it begins at tend to report greater subjective well-being. People who are religious, devout, but not extremists tend to report greater subjective well-being and life satisfaction, more ability to cope with stress and crisis, and fewer symptoms of depression than secular people. However, it should be pointed out that some have vigorously refuted such sweeping conclusions, arguing the link between religiosity and positive health outcomes is grossly exaggerated. Finally, there's certainly the possibility that because of the non-religious of the United States makes one a member of wildly unliked, distrusted, stigmatized minority, they could take a psychological toll on mental health. So this is actually talking about, and scroll up a little bit.
So that's my point. My point is this paper is looking at these, the title of all of these sections is going through the evidence. It's not a persuasive essay. So I actually agree. Life satisfaction and psychological well-being. I do think that personally, on an individual level, religious people do tend to report higher levels of life satisfaction, higher levels of happiness. You know, there's other things. Atheists tend to have higher IQs. You know,
Well,
all different kinds of things. But I'm looking at. But that's why I'm looking at criminality. So I'm looking at outcomes for society. We're not talking about whether it's better for individuals.
Are you ever going to let me
themselves to be-
respond to this or no?
I haven't even gotten through this.
Yeah,
because
but
you
I mean,
keep talking about random shit.
I'm not talking about random things. If you bring up a paper like this inside of a debate, you don't think that it's legitimate for me to ask you a couple of basic questions so that we can define the context of the paper, one, and then two, to make sure that we're not looking. So that we're not looking
Scroll
at
down a little bit more, Jasmine. Scroll
and
down
then two, so that we're not
looking
looking
at the abstract.
And then two, so that we're not looking at a correlatory versus something which has been controlled for. And then three, what the methodology is for them to discover this. Because as we're going through this, Jasmine, stop talking, Jasmine. So then what we could do is at the end,
retarded.
As we're going through, how is that retarded? What objection do you have to that?
Wait, Jasmine, Jasmine, let's let Andrew finish his point, because to be fair, he hasn't talked in a minute. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so anyway, all of those are fair objections for me to bring up to this. You haven't described any of them. I don't even know that you've actually read this paper. I'm not even sure that you have. Then why don't you tell me what they consider well-being and their methodologies are? What are they?
That is my point, is that the study, let's go to the abstract. The study is not making a claim about
I thought it
that.
wasn't
it's
a study.
At each individual metric, right?
Is it a study?
Let's go up.
Is it a study or isn't
abstract. What do we currently know about atheism?
Well, stop. Is it a? I just want to know clarification. Is it a study?
The abstract is telling you what the paper is there to do.
Yeah, but
this article offers a thorough presentation and discussion of the latest social scientific research concerning the identities, values, and behavior of people who don't believe in God or are non-religious, and addresses the ways in which atheism and secularity is properly correlated with societal well-being. So you want to know what societal well-being is,
so
right?
now hang on. Okay, so here's what I get from this. Go back up, please, to where we just were.
Well,
in the
I'm looking
abstract.
for their definition of well-being.
Hang on, go back. Well, I would probably be under definitions, but go back up.
That's where I went.
To the abstract. Let me respond first to the abstract. It says this article offers a thorough presentation and discussion of the latest social scientific research concerning identities, values, and behaviors of people who don't believe in God or are non-religious, and addresses the ways in which atheism and secularity are positively correlated with social well-being. Got it. So this is an opinion piece. It's not an actual study. There's no.
But it's did
That's
you
it.
not see? Are you actually mentally ill? Do you not see that it's going based off? So it's not this person's opinion that murder rates are lower in secular nations.
Well, the problem
That
is
because that is
yeah.
the fact. It's giving you the
it's not a
facts.
fact. What they're doing is they're giving you citations for you to go and you can interpret the data how you see fit from those citations.
Okay,
But this is
the
still
murder
just
rates,
stop, Jasmine.
whatever
This
you
is still just the overarching
murder rates
opinion
are
of this
lower
person.
in those countries. There are also other outcomes that I brought up to you about lower infant mortality rates, almost on a lot of different metrics, which I have in my notes, which we can even go through in this paper.
Yeah, let's
we can
go
even
through
go
it.
through in this paper.
Okay,
this
so
paper is linking to studies that have studied this, and it's studied murder rates and compared them. So if you want to refute this, then pull up some evidence that the murder rates are actually that this person, this is just their opinion, even though they're giving you the citations, and it's a published piece that was peer reviewed in a real journal. There are people peer reviewed this, and they don't let just bullshit fly. That they wouldn't be like, oh, actually the murder rates are reversed, but we're just going to let it fly because it's an opinion piece. This is not an opinion.
So I have a question for you. Is this a meta-analysis or isn't it?
Yes.
It is. Can you show me where it's a meta-analysis?
I can't even scroll on this. But what do you mean? It depends. What do you mean by meta-analysis? Do you mean that it's looking at the analyses of a lot of other studies?
No. Listen, inside of sociology, there's a huge problem with replication of studies. Okay, it's called the replication crisis. It affects. Hang on, it affects all forms of science, but sociology is particularly infected by it. So one of the ways that they're able to kind of push back a little bit against the fact that almost 50% of all sociological studies can't be replicated, which means that they probably have terrible results, is by having what's called a meta-analysis done, which is where they take all of the studies inside of that field and then they're analyzed by a whole bunch of scientists in order
that
to
is
figure
literally
out
what
what's
this
good
is.
or not.
That is what this
is.
That's how it got
me
published.
Where it says that it's a meta-analysis.
The fact that it's peer reviewed and it has all of
peer review doesn't mean anything.
But when it's looking at so they're looking at the field and all the social research we have on secularism versus atheism.
Yeah, that's not a meta-analysis.
All of this.
That doesn't mean it's a meta-analysis.
Okay. Well, even if it's not a meta-analysis, can you please tell me how this is wrong? All of this that it used, which all of this comes from other reputable, respectable, real sources, and it's giving you stats about the murder rate.
I just tried to explain it to you. I'll explain it to you again.
You're refuting this paper. You're refuting the paper based on what?
I'm trying to explain it to you. If you are able to concede this point, which you can look it up right now, and I'll give you the time to look it up, that sociology has a huge problem with replication of results, which it does, has a massive problem with it, then kind of the offset to that is what's called a meta-analysis. Okay, that way we know that the data that we're looking at is okay enough for us to at least examine so that we can understand that we're not coming to false views based on the fact that these people are just credentialized. So is this a meta-analysis or isn't it?
Okay, if it's not a meta-analysis, then are you saying, because this is the thing, there are some stats that are very easy. So sociology, I get what you're saying, but where you're wrong is that certain things in sociology are harder to get. It's harder to get that information than others. The murder rate is not a difficult one to get.
It could be, depending on the criteria of what they consider murder to be. That's why it's important that we know the methodology.
And look it up and refute it then. If you're just going to say this is
it's your burden. It's your burden, not mine. So tell me how they what are the metrics they use for murder?
Let's look at the reference and then let's look at that paper, because this is just referencing a bunch of studies. So let's do it then. Let's go for it. If you want to do this, let's do this. All right,
guys, real quick. I kind of skimmed through this as we were going through it. It seems that on certain points it supports secularism, and other points it supports religion. Like,
I thought it was an opinion persuasive piece. I guess not then.
So I thought it was a study in a meta-analysis 5 minutes ago.
for example,
Well, I'm going with what you said.
What the
Okay,
fuck?
let's
So
see it. Let's see.
for real
What
quick.
insane is this chick? I can't even believe this.
Okay,
All right, so
let's see.
Wait, real quick. So for some things, like for example, murder rate seems to point that hey, secularism works better. But for other things, like for example, happiness, it seems to say hey, religion works better.
Yeah, I agree. But he's saying that the murder rates could be wrong. So he wants to go through. Let's find the study they cited and let's go through it and see
Well, I
how
mean,
they're
if this is
defining
your
murder and all that.
if this is your evidence, yeah, we have to first define
Sure.
murder, then we have to look at the metrics for how they're kind of assigning that. And so usually you
We're
find that in a
assume to see
controlled
where
study
it
under
goes.
methodology. So,
Okay.
I
right,
did
so
see.
let's see.
By the way, guys, 10-minute
Jensen
warning before we move on to
2006.
the
So
next
this,
topic.
so actually, this is in a lot of studies. So there's unless these are all from the same, which I don't think there's not. Yeah, no, they're all different years. So there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 studies that we can go through, and I have time. Let's go through all 4. If you're saying these are all just wrong and this is just an incorrect thing, then let's see Jensen 2006. Let's go down and let's copy and paste it and let's go through it. Let's go through all of them. Why not?
Let's just do 1 or 2.
Okay. So does this still share the screen if I open in another tab, the study?
Most likely, but I'll tell you once you do.
So here we go. Religious cosmologies and homicide rates among nations. How do I copy this? Okay, I'm just going to search it. Jensen 2006. Paper called again. Homicide rate nation. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so yeah, it's not shared, so you have to share the other screen.
Okay.
I'll just remove this one.
So
it'll be easier for you to share the other one.
All right, let me make sure we can open it. Because if we have to
you're
go
not
through my
so Jazmen, I just want to make sure that I get this clarified. You're not actually familiar with any of the studies that are inside of this paper, nor are you actually familiar with the paper, but you did bring it to debate over. Is that correct?
I am familiar with the paper. That's why I knew when it comes with happiness, I did read the entire paper. Now I didn't go through and check every source because when I'm looking at a peer-reviewed paper that's been published and it's giving me 4 sources.
Let's find out if
for
you're
a
telling the
stat,
truth. Let's
I'm
find
not
out if
gonna
you're telling the truth. Close your eyes and put your hands up like this. Close your eyes, put your hands up like this. We'll determine if you're telling the truth.
Doing that. Like,
no,
that's absolutely not
you can't. I don't believe that if you closed your eyes, put your hands up, you could even tell me what one of the sources is. I don't even believe it. I don't think you've read any of these sources, and yet you still brought it to a debate.
There's one of the ones I was going to look at was the one that starts with. Let me see it.
You don't know. You don't know any of them. You don't know any of the sources.
The
you don't know anything. Why did you bring this to a debate? You haven't even read it.
Researcher, because I don't remember the name of the researcher when I read this, every single stat that I have, then none of it's valid. SureCat, this is the one I'm talking about. SureCat is, and there was a bunch of it. 2003, 2006, 2008, 2009.
Yeah, now that you're reading it verbatim.
I said it starts with an S. I didn't remember the term SureCat because I didn't prepare for this for 2,000 hours, but I did read it. I remember being like, okay, SureCat seems like he's done, or the one that starts with S seems like he's done a lot on this.
So you haven't read these primary
that I just brought up.
Jazmen,
just because you don't memorize all of the names in a
you didn't even understand the context of the paper.
The paper is not legitimate because
you didn't even understand the context of the paper.
This is as valid of a source as you can get.
Keep screeching.
It's linking to other yeah, because all you do is you talk louder. Yeah, go for it. We can do this all day. Look,
all you're doing is reading.
Year-old man, it doesn't look as stupid for me to come play this shit online. But
you have not. I mean, you're a prostitute. What do you mean? You can't make any bad claims about what you do online.
Sitting here, of all the things that you could be doing,
you would help your sister for money. Like, what are you talking about? How could you possibly make any claims against me?
You're sitting here, of all the things you could be doing, of all the people you could be doing, you're sitting here having a debate with a prostitute.
You requested the debate. I didn't reach out for a debate with you. I didn't reach out.
Well, to be fair, I was actually the one that suggested this debate.
So then on top of that, again, you're diverting.
You did.
Again, all you're doing here, again and again and again, same thing over and over. You haven't read any of the sources. You're not familiar with the paper. You couldn't tell me the methodologies. You can't tell me anything.
Read all these? can tell you
No.
right now, I didn't go
You
read
didn't
all
read any
these,
of it.
but I read the original
You're wasting
paper.
everybody's
I
time.
knew that and I know when a source
All
is
you're
valid.
doing is wasting
it's
our
an
time.
academic paper. All of the citations are here. I remembered that this guy, Surecat, even though I didn't remember it was actually Surecat, I just
Screech
remembered it started
louder.
with an S.
Keep
Has
screeching.
a What do you mean? No,
All you're doing is
you
reading.
did not prove your point in the slightest.
You
and if you want to go, let's
brought
go
evidence.
through every single one of these
You
and see if
brought
it's not a valid
evidence.
source.
You brought
Usually,
evidence
when
to a debate
something
you
is
hadn't even
published-
read.
Yes, I did read the paper.
You
I
didn't
didn't read
read
every
it.
source in it. No, that's not how
Then
this
how come
works,
you couldn't
Andrew.
tell
When
me
you
the?
look up-
How
when
come
you
you
look
couldn't
up
tell me the
when you look up
methodology?
a paper that is studied, that has been peer reviewed, that's citing a bunch of stuff, you don't have to go read every single citation in order to be able to logically and on good authority assume that the information is correct. You fucking idiot.
You do if you don't have a meta-analysis, which is available to you to make the
well,
determination that what you're reading is
that's not
true. You brought an
That is
opinion
not
piece.
true.
It is when you have
Otherwise,
50%
you're
of
saying
them
all
are wrong.
sociology. You're saying all of sociology is bullshit unless the paper says it's a meta-analysis when
I'm
the
saying-
paper is citing to other journals. And not
Jasmine,
only have those sources been
Jasmine.
peer reviewed and actually published, do you know how much it takes for
Jasmine,
something to get published?
if
So not
you-
only is it looking at what's already been published, it's
Just read.
looking at multiple sources.
Screeching at the top of your lungs. Calm down.
It's give you 4 sources for that.
You
No,
have-
because
if
your
you have
strategy
50
is just to talk over
if
me.
you have
I can talk
50
over you too. I'm just
All right,
making
all right,
talk
wait,
over
hang on,
you.
hang on. All right,
You're
it
just
was fun
reading.
for a while. It was fun for a while. I do want to get back into it.
Yeah, so let me just say, right, so that you understand, if you have a particular area of science which suffers from 50% or more of that discipline being something which is unable to be reproduced, that means that a lot of it is wrong. And the only offshoot for that inside of those sciences, which is why most skilled, competent debaters will bring what's called a meta-analysis, which takes the
No,
entirety.
that's not true.
Yes, it is true. And they'll take the entirety of those studies under a meta-analysis in order to present their point,
Were your
not
stats all from
Let's go to my Instagram after this to know too. I'm gonna go back every single stat that Andrew has ever said on any show. It was done. He was founded from a meta-analysis. That's what he's saying, and that's not true. It's not true that something has to be a meta-analysis for it to be true. This paper has been published and reviewed, and it's looking at a multitude of other studies and actually giving you multiple resources, giving you 4 papers that prove that point. But we could just look, are murders higher in secular or non-secular countries? You're saying any response we get from the internet right now is all wrong unless it's done by a meta-analysis? No, I'm just saying that if you're going to cite sociological studies and you're going to bring sociological studies to a debate,
they don't count.
Yeah, well,
unless
the burden of proof becomes far more limited if I can just ask or assert that, hey, based on other meta-analysis which have been done on sociology, almost 50% of everything done can't be reproduced. So we probably want to bring in an entirety of a meta-analysis.
Here we go. So this is one of the papers. So should I share this, or do you want me to just read it? This is one of the things it's cited.
Okay,
and I can read directly from it.
Wait, Jazmen, real quick before we do that. So let's let you read the source that I guess Andrew asked you for when it comes to the gun thing. Let's just do one source and then let's move on. And I do want to get into the next topic. Unless you guys just want to fuck the next topic and just focus on this one.
No,
I prepared for the next one as well.
So. Okay. So I'll let you really quickly show that source and then we'll do closing statements. So
do you want here? We can even just look at the abstract. So this is what I'll just read it to you. Although religion has been viewed as in the source for people that are noticing religious cosmologies and homicide rates among nations, a closer look. This was one of the 4 sources that the paper cited that Andrew was throwing out, but this is what it says.
We can't see it. Can you share that screen?
Yeah. Okay, let's see. That present. It's making sure I have to stop and then share again, I think.
Yeah, stop and then share.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, so can you guys see it now?
Yep.
Okay. So, although religion has been viewed as an important role in the maintenance of moral order, the most recent analysis of variation in homicide rates among nations argues that homicide is facilitated by high levels of religiosity. That's a different source that says this. So this is all building on top of each other. That analysis, however, was based on scatter plots for 18 prosperous nations and focused primarily on the United States compared to secular nations. Because there are numerous dimensions to religiosity and a variety of alternative explanations of homicide rates, a more complex analysis is required before more definitive conclusions can be reached. This study
That's
attempts
what I
such
thought.
analysis.
Hang on. Read the last sentence again.
That's what this study is doing. It linked to this study. This study is
read the last.
at,
Just read the last sentence for me. Just
Are
clarifying.
you fucking retarded?
Please
I'm not reading
read
the last sentence again. I'm not. The study
not going to?
attempts such an analysis for a much larger sample of nations and tests Durkheim's hypothesis that religious passion as a valuable characteristic of nations is a positive correlate of homicide rates. A multiple regression analysis reveals a complex relationship with some dimensions of religiosity, encouraging homicide and other dimensions.
Now, can I respond to some of what you've read?
No, because
I'm not
this
allowed
was
to.
one of the listed 4 studies.
How long does she get to filibuster, Alex?
Let's let Andrew respond to that, to be fair.
So you said, this says right here at the top, because there are numerous dimensions to religiosity, that would be methodology, Jazmen, and a variety of alternative explanations of homicide rates. Again, methodology, Jazmen.
I know. That's why I gave you
Jazmen, let me finish,
Jazmen.
Let me finish, Jazmen. You won't let me finish, Jazmen.
You don't just take one
let me finish, Jazmen.
Stop talking, Jazmen. You're still talking.
Jazmen, hush, Jazmen. Stop talking. Stop reading.
Guys, one at a time. Let's just really quickly let Andrew respond, and then you can respond.
Yeah, scroll it back up, please, so I can finish my response to what you've already read.
You're not arguing anything.
I am arguing.
No one was disputing that. No one was
disputing
great.
That. So anyway,
let's just let him say what he wants to say, and then
because there are numerous dimensions to religiosity and a variety of alternative explanations of homicide rates, the more complex analysis is required before more definitive conclusions can be reached. This is all correlatory. You haven't even read the study. You didn't read the original paper that these studies were based off of. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Original paper. I did read the original paper,
and the original paper
said that those murder rates are higher in religious countries than
non-religious
countries. Based on what
methodology?
And they gave you 4
What methodology? What's the methodology?
Peer-reviewed papers.
What's the methodology?
4 other peer-reviewed papers.
What's the methodology in those papers?
Showcase. This is one of them. You won't let me fucking read it.
No, that's not methodology. What's the methodology in these papers? You didn't even let me get to it. Now I can't even. Okay, wait. You can just hit Control F and go to methodology.
I can't, unless you want me to hide the screen and use my real name to sign into the institution so I can access the whole paper, because right now.
Well, you should have read the paper and then you could tell me the methodology.
No,
you shouldn't have read it.
I looked at one paper that's looking at all of the studies in this particular area, giving you multiple references for every single thing that it said. It gave you 4 references for the fact that murder rates are higher in religious areas than secular ones. This is very easy for the audience. If you believe that I'm incorrect and Andrew is correct, please go ahead and find a source that says the opposite and we can compare and contrast. But as far as I know, this is not disputed in any way. It seems like this is pretty, and by you being like, well, it's not a meta-analysis and there are 4 sources, but you didn't actually read the 4 sources, so
That's
you can't actually trust a paper. No, so how come
you can't? Because you don't know what the stats. Name a stat that I named.
You
can't.
I don't even remember what.
You can't because you're full of shit. You don't know what you're talking about.
You
don't know what you're talking about.
I've listened to you debate. Are all of them for meta-analyses? You know what? I'm gonna have my assistant on this right now. I'm gonna be like, go find a stat.
Get your assistant on it.
Yeah,
get your assistant on it.
What's one stat? Find one stat Andrew has mentioned and check to see if it's done from a meta-analysis. Let's see.
Well,
because
it would depend on what the stat. It would depend on if the stat was from sociology or not, right?
If this is now your new metric for how we discern facts, is we can't look at papers because they're persuasive pieces, and all of the sources in there, none of them are valid. You're saying this one, and this is going through
Jazmen,
and telling you
how could you prevent
how it got
Jazmen,
to the conclusion
stop reading for a
second. We can go to another page and we can also see how that it went through this
Jazmen,
paper,
you're still
which
reading,
was reviewed,
Jazmen.
went through 4 other papers that all came to the same place, Andrew. So if you want to completely get rid of this entire field of study, if you want to say this paper is all bullshit
Not
because
saying
it's not
any
a
of that.
meta-analysis and all of its sources are bullshit
Nope,
because it's not
never said any of
meta-analysis,
that.
and
You're
murder
still
rates
reading.
somehow aren't higher, and murder rates somehow aren't higher, infant mortality isn't
You're
higher,
still
none
reading.
of these things are higher,
Yeah.
then I would love to know.
Okay, so
where you
anyway,
have.
I'm just going to kind of say this again so that you understand.
If you do that while I'm talking, I'll do it when you're talking.
Yeah, but I mean, I wasn't filibustering. You were.
No, that's you. I think you filibustered a lot of times, and if you want to talk while I'm talking, I will do the same to you. I'm not.
Yeah, but you don't ever stop talking.
By
So
you of all
that's
people.
the thing.
All right, wait.
Right?
How about we both don't talk over the other person? Let's just.
You're still reeing, by the way.
Reeing
is still reeing.
Hang on. I do want to get to the end of this topic because it's already an hour and a half now. We have a second topic. So why don't we just I'll let you guys go at it for another minute or two, and then we'll get into closing statements.
Yeah. So anyway, without understanding the methodology, Jazmen, how do you know that you're not coming to bad conclusions?
Because I do know, this is how I typically do my research, is I look for valid, peer-reviewed, published sources. Now, if that source, such as this paper, has looked at, it's a paper that has been peer-reviewed, it's been looked at multiple academics. You do not have the credentials to even go through any of this. I don't know what your education level is, but I don't think that it's at that level.
You do?
And then that, I mean, I'm definitely more educated than you, unless you have a doctorate degree that I don't know about.
You have a doctorate?
I have a Juris Doctor. A Juris Doctor is a doctorate degree, you idiot.
Oh, I didn't know you had a doctorate. I didn't know.
You didn't? You think lawyers? How did I be a lawyer?
Well, I didn't know you were actually a lawyer.
Yeah, I'm actually a lawyer. So so you just didn't believe me. But if you didn't not believe me, and if you took that I was a lawyer, you would know that I have a doctorate.
I didn't make
degree,
I didn't make any accusations. Calm down.
Well,
I just asked if you had one.
You knew I call myself a lawyer, and so that means I have a doctorate degree. And that's
yeah.
True.
I mean, you can call yourself whatever you want, right? So doesn't mean it's true.
I wouldn't call myself something that I don't have. And if I'm calling myself a lawyer, then I'm lying about that. Then I must be lying about the doctorate too. However, because I'm a lawyer, I also have a doctorate degree. So either you can think I'm lying about both or neither, but actually
I didn't say you're lying about anything. I just asked a clarifying question. Calm down.
Yes, I have a doctor. Again, I have a Juris Doctor.
I understand how you would be able to.
I have a Juris Doctor from a first-tier law school that I got into with a full ride after I scored a 171
And did they teach you when you were
LSAT?
getting that doctorate? Did they teach you that methodologies inside of studies are very important to notate?
But what I'm
Stop,
saying
Jazmen.
is,
Let me finish my question, Jazmen. Let me finish my question, Jazmen. Let me finish my question, Jazmen.
You interrupted me.
You're still reading. You're still reading.
You interrupted me.
I didn't interrupt. You were done talking. I was responding.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You interrupted me. I'm saying that it's a really good way to look into,
Screech louder,
if you're trying to do research, to look for valid sources. This is a valid source. This
it's so valid. You didn't even read it. You didn't even read it.
Let me finish.
You didn't even read it.
I did read it. You're just saying I didn't read it. You just saying things doesn't make it
true.
You
admitted you didn't read it. You want me to find the timestamp?
I didn't read that. I read the paper. I didn't read every single source.
You didn't read any of them. You don't even know the methodologies. You don't know anything. You just made it all up.
Sources. It gave you 4 sources. In fact, some of the most interesting ones to me, the most interesting ones to me were the ones done by SureCat, and that's why there was 2002, 2003, 2006, 2008, 2009, and I remember seeing the name SureCat. I'm like, oh, when I have time later, let me go into SureCat because this actually is just interesting. But you can typically, and I'm going to say this for everyone, you can typically, when something is peer reviewed and when something is looking at a multitude of sources and it's giving you 4 sources for a stat that says something like murder rates are lower in X countries, you can on good authority say it's true. You're not wrong if you didn't go look at every single study, read every single paper,
what's a meta,
and then look at every single methodology.
What's a meta-analysis, Jazmen? What is it?
4 sources.
What's a meta-analysis?
It gave you 4 sources.
So what?
It gave you 4 sources.
So what? What's a meta-analysis? What's a meta-analysis?
It is perfectly reasonable. Okay, it is perfectly reasonable to take this article, read that part, and see it as true without going in and looking at the methodology of every single study.
Jazmen, are you aware that people? Are you aware that people have sent in peer-reviewed studies that are mock studies just to fuck with the system and done it on purpose? They have been. Stop talking, Jazmen. It's my turn, Jazmen.
You need to know how to
Jazmen.
determine whether a
yes,
study
Jazmen,
is
you do, but they're all peer-reviewed, Jazmen.
That's why you're looking at multiple things. It was published. So you're saying that. So wait, which
peer review,
study that
Jasmine?
was
They were
published?
peer review,
Wait,
Jasmine.
which study that was published in an actual journal that went through the peer review process did someone fake? I want to know. Can you send me that?
Yeah, I can send it to you right now. There was a whole
Send it to me.
sequence. Whole sequence of studies.
Guys, I let it go for way longer. We gotta move on to the next topic. I'm gonna do quick closing thoughts, and then we are gonna have to keep the next one a bit quicker since we're already coming up an hour 40 minutes. Okay. So Jazmen, since I let you open, Andrew, you go first with the closing statement. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this was fun to say the least. We end up starting with, we have kind of this subjective model and worldview, and under her purview, she can't really actually say that there's anything wrong with anything that I morally postulate as an ought whatsoever. Once we get into the utilitarian side and we test that logic, we kind of find out we're not even really sure that she's a freaking utilitarian. She kind of won't commit to what she considers to be any type of ethical system, because basically it all just comes down to Jazmen's personal preferences. When we're trying to get into, though, let's assume you are a utilitarian. I'm trying to assume something, some type of any kind of moral purview. I'm willing to engage with that worldview. So she brings up a sequence of studies that she never read in papers that she clearly never read. She doesn't know the methodology. She doesn't even know what a meta-analysis is. She doesn't know anything about any of this. She doesn't know what's going on with the replication crisis and sociology. On top of all that, people have sent in fake study after fake study. I pulled it up right here. I'll send it to Jazmen. They've sent them in just to test the peer review process. They get peer reviewed and often published, even though they know that the things inside of them are not true. That's why you have to have some type of analysis, and you need to be able to go over the methodology. And what she brought instead was a sequence of data to a study she wasn't even familiar with. A bunch of stuff that she even said it's probably just correlatory. It's absolutely insane to me. Okay, I can't even understand why anybody would ever take this woman seriously about anything she ever says again.
Okay, Jazmen.
Okay, my turn. So I would say one on the worldview. Andrew's is also subjective. So I think there we can say it's a draw, although he said in the beginning that he won. He still never explained how he won with that metric. Also, so the only types of studies that are valid are not meta-analyses. And this is just for everyone in the audience. Andrew is not as well educated as I am. So let me just tell you something. When the way to look for information like the murder rates. And if I'm wrong on this, I would love to see any information that I'm wrong on this. I found a study that was published that looked at a multitude of other studies that were also cited. I didn't look at every single citation. Andrew, I personally, if the end of this debate is Andrew saying that the statistics are false and the paper is false, I'm okay with that, because usually when people start refuting the paper and they start refuting the statistics without telling you why exactly, and they don't have any evidence to the contrary, then I think that's a good place to end the debate. He just thinks that you shouldn't trust papers. And even if it is correlatory, yes, secular nations tend to have lower crime, along with a multitude of other things, which I'm going to briefly go over. That is also from this paper, as well as another paper that I was looking at. I'm going to quickly go over this. So Andrew might think all of this is false, but it's not. And there are multiple sources, multiple papers that this study looked at in order to come to those conclusions. And it came to different conclusions on other parts, like psychological well-being and life satisfaction. But most secular countries in the world today are much better on every measure of peace, prosperity, and societal well-being. And these are, he likes what's well-being: infant mortality, life expectancy, educational attainment, economic prosperity, freedom, and levels of corruption in the country. In fact, those countries with the highest murder rates: Jamaica, Honduras, Guatemala, Colombia, and Brazil, which somehow Andrew was saying the murders might be justified. I leave that up to you guys. Whereas the lowest murder rates are in countries, even like Singapore, which are highly secular. Even if you look at the states in the United States, the ones that are the most religious have the highest rates of STDs, poverty, also murder, gun violence, compared to less religious states. So even if we're looking at it from a utilitarian standpoint, I would say secularism is better. If you want to throw out all the data, you can throw out all the data, but I trust the data, and that's what the data says.
All right. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic. That was fiery as fuck. we'll keep the next one a little shorter because I do got to make it to Whole Foods as always. So anyway, so the next topic I believe was um, remind me again. It was about should women start families and give birth at a young age? Correct. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yep, that's
cool.
correct. So
So for the last one, I let Jasmine kick it off. So for this one, I will let Andrew kick it off for the opening statement.
Yeah, so I have this on my screen right now. We're talking about maternal deaths when it comes to children. We go back looking at just the 1970s to now. Rates increased with maternal age. Rates in 2021 were 20.4 deaths per 100,000 live births for women under the age 25, 31. 3 for those aged 25 to 39, and 138.5 for those aged 40 and over. The rate for women aged 40 and over was 6.8 times higher than the rate for women under 25. Differences in the rate between age groups were statistically significant. The increases in the rates between 2020 and 2021 for each of these age groups were statistically significant. That's very important that you note that down. You can find this. This is just so that Jazmen has this information. If you have mean age of mother, 1970 to 2000. In the year 2000, the average American woman having her first baby was almost 25 years old. In 1970, the average age was 21.4 years for her first birth, according to the new report. So essentially, my argument kind of gathers around this, which is to say that younger women are more fertile and they have much more childbearing years, to the point where it's statistically significant that if you have sex and impregnate an older woman, you increase your likelihood of all sorts of birth defects, including the birth not happening, by a significant margin. So is it better for society for women to have children when they're younger? I think it is. I can't even imagine how Jasmine's going to dispute this, but I can't wait to see.
Okay, Jasmine.
all right. So I would say that pretty much, at least in the United States in 2023, all the information we have indicates that you should wait. It has the best marital outcome. So if we just look at marriage, if you get married at 20, you have a 50% more chance of getting divorced than if you get married at 25. So between the ages of 25 and 32 seem to be the best. And being college educated, going to go get educated, is better to do that before you have children and get married than after. Your rates of likelihood of divorce goes way down. It goes way down if you have a bachelor's degree. If you have my level of education, a doctorate degree, it goes down to half of that. The higher the education, the lower your likelihood of divorce. Also, this group of women is the only group of women where not only the marriage rates are going up and the birth rates are going up as well. Also, children born to older women have better outcomes. So the more older and more educated you are, the benefits are very vast. We can go through these. These are from Pew Research, U.S. Bureau of Statistics. I don't know if it's a meta-analysis. I don't know if what he just said was a meta-analysis either, but we can go into that. Sharper children, actually maternal education seems to be one of the biggest factors that contribute to childhood cognitive development and well-being. Higher test scores, sharper cognitive abilities, better outcomes in general. So yeah, I think that the best course of action for women in America is go to school, wait till you're a little older, and then get married. Your kids, it's not about just how many kids you can produce. It's about your kids also thriving and having a good life.
All right, hell yeah. All right, now we're going to open up the open panel portion. Again, I'm going to keep this one a little shorter than the last one. I'm going to take a piss, but you guys have at it.
Yeah, so that really didn't have much to do with the topic. Can we start with the rate for women age 40 and over, 6.8 times higher than the rate for women under 25 to see the death of babies and all sorts of birth defects at a rapid rate? You can find this information from the CDC itself. That'd be cdc.gov. Doesn't it seem like it was healthier for both the children then and for the mother to have children when they're younger?
Yeah, no, to have children when you're older actually has better outcomes for the children. So yeah, I think you do increase your likelihood of having issues with pregnancy, but women who have children over 30, now over 40 is a little different than over 30, like between 30 to 35, I think is kind of the best years to have children. And those children tend to have much better outcomes.
Even up to 31 years old, there's a statistical, if you're looking at this for maternal, when you're talking about these types of deaths, you'll find that it's a statistical significance between these age brackets when it comes to deformities, when it comes to infant mortality, when it comes to almost everything, which is risky. So this is not just risky to the child, but it's also risky to the mother.
Okay, so so let's say this. Can you admit though that the children who don't get any of those risks and they actually make it, those children, are you disputing the stats that
Well,
those
we
children
need
actually end up thriving?
well,
Do they
before we
actually
can
end up thriving?
that would not answer to the question as to whether or not women should have them when they're younger. So there's another
So let's
multi-pronged
look
hang
at
on. There's
so
I'm
let's say
trying
a
let me
woman
finish my
31.
point and then I'll let you talk,
Okay.
I promise. Okay? The other prong here, for one thing, I don't think you're going to dispute those facts, but the other prong here is that there's longevity involved, which is that when you're younger and more fertile, you can have more children. That's a true statement, and they're going to be healthier children. So you say that the outcomes for women who are having children later in life are better, but they actually have less children. It is true, maybe they can donate more resources to those children, but don't you think that having more children's better?
I don't think necessarily having more children is better. I think, in fact, if you're just going to have more children and they're all going to be living in poverty, they're not going to be scoring high, they're not going to have sharp cognitive abilities, you're more likely to get divorced because you got married and had those children younger. I think those are all negative outcomes. I think parents.
So you don't want the black community to have children?
I'm not saying I don't want them to. I'm saying it's worse. I think for women in the
So you
black
think they
community,
shouldn't? You think they shouldn't have them?
my advice still stands. If there's a woman that's 20, she can do whatever she wants. My advice to you, woman in poverty that apparently is black, you should go to school, get college educated. That's going to lower your chances of divorce, and it's going to have better outcomes for your children. Even if that means you can only have 2 children instead of 20, I still think that's better.
Yeah. So your advice, though, to young African American women would be that the outcomes of your children are going to be much worse than the outcome of poor white children, so you just shouldn't have children.
I didn't say it was based on race.
Until
I
you
said
end
that it was
up in a
based on
stable.
education.
Well, no. If it's based on the metrics that you laid out, right, then wouldn't you have to give that advice along racial lines?
No, because
why would you
Can
not?
argue. You can
why
argue.
Would you not?
You can. Because none of the metrics I said had to do with race. Now, it's true that black women are more likely to be in poverty, are more likely to maybe even have kids young. I don't think they should. It's not
right.
Michelle Obama is a black woman who had waited till she was older and had kids.
So then your advice for young white people and young black people, you would say that because young white people are able to get, no, it's not the same, because you would have to concede that young whites, for instance, inside of the United States are more likely to have these better outcomes younger than young black people. So you would tell young black people that it's probably an imperative that they don't have children because the outcomes of the children are going to be necessarily worse than the outcomes for young white children.
That
correct?
Doesn't logically follow.
How does it not?
Being older, being 25 and up, so black women can choose to have kids 25 and up too, and trying to get a college education is still going to be better. That advice is also for black women and for white women. Now, if you can't achieve those things, I'm not telling you shouldn't have children. That's a completely different claim.
The question is, Jazmen, you have a disparity here.
Let me finish. The question is, should women wait until they're older in order to have children, or should they do it young? I'm saying that the data shows that the children born to older women, especially if those women are educated, tend to do much better, and the women themselves tend to do much better.
And if we break down,
give that advice across racial lines.
But as I'm looking at this, do you agree that the later in life, even educated, that black women's children, even educated, have worse outcomes than white people's children, even educated, when they're older?
If there's, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what the data indicates.
Right. So then using this logical metric that you have of better outcomes, wouldn't you say that it would be better for them then, if they're going to have worse outcomes, to not have the children?
No, I don't think people that have worse outcomes should not have children. I'm saying you should do whatever you can in your power. No, you let me finish. I let you finish your fucking question.
No argument.
I'm saying that people should do this is a should. You should do whatever is in your power to have children. If I was saying that no one who can't guarantee these perfect outcomes should have children, then I would say only people who have as much education as me should have children, and people that like you shouldn't. That's not what I said. I'm saying what's best. And these are the things that if we're giving advice to young women, should these women try to have children early or should they wait? And I'm saying that they should wait. And this applies across race. This applies to everyone. Now, if you want to have kids early, or your only option is to have kids early, or you can't afford to go to college, I'm not saying you shouldn't have kids. All I'm saying is that if it's an option you, that your childhood outcomes will be better.
So then if the option for the outcome of like college and this and that is not going to actually lead to the better outcome, would you say that the woman should wait until later in life then to have the child, or should
You're
she have it
saying
when she's younger and fertile?
if you're saying if we're not looking at socioeconomic status or maternal education
No,
at
that's
all,
not what
like
I
if we're just
asked.
isolating.
Your argument was this. You said if you're not able to achieve a higher education level or something like this based on your circumstances, I'm not saying you shouldn't have children. Okay,
Mhm.
so I'm going to grant this and say then if that's true, to the people who are not able to achieve whatever this higher socioeconomic status is, would you tell them then that they should probably, if they're going to have a child, have it in their more fertile years that has less impact on the health of the child and the health of the mother?
I would say if that's the case, you should still wait till you're at least 25, because at 25, between
that's young,
25 and
though.
32. Well, what are we? Because is young 20 or is young 28? I'm 28, because I would say those are different. Is all of your 20s still
Well,
young?
I mean, you're
Because
still
I
going to
wouldn't.
have, yeah, but what would be kind of your pushback against somebody at 21 or
That's what I'm
23
about to tell you
having a
that. I'm
child
about to.
versus 25?
That's what I'm telling you, because your divorce rate goes down by 50% versus 20 and
Yeah, but
25. That's a big thing,
okay,
because
yeah, but
I'm sure you're not
we're
a
not
big
talking about the
proponent of. Can I
divorce.
finish? You asked me a question. You don't let
Yeah,
me
I'm just saying
answer
we're
it.
not talking about
So,
divorces, though.
but that matters, because if you're having a kid, unless you want to have a kid without a father, I'm assuming that you also are advocating for two parents that are probably married, or their relationship has a higher likelihood of working out. I would say that if you wait until you're at least 25, and the statistics back me up, that when you're 25, your rate of your relationship with the father, I'm presuming, goes up by 50%, that you should still
Is that
wait. There are
across
also
all? Is
other
that
studies
across
that
all
I can
demographic
link
lines?
that
Is that
don't even
across all
necessarily.
racial? Jasmine, is that across all racial demographic lines?
That's the general statistic. Now, if you want to isolate just Black
Well,
women, then
let's
show
do
me a
some
study that
science.
shows.
Well, we would have to
No,
do a little
show me.
science and isolate, right? So this
So
is
show
your
me that stat.
position. It's your position. I'm asking you.
My position is that the stats overall show. I
Mhm.
haven't seen a stat that says Black women who marry under 25 somehow are exempt from this. The stats that I've seen that I can show you, right? This is pretty common. Even Rolo fucking had to concede to this on Fresh and Fit a couple weeks ago, that a woman that gets married at 20 is 50% more likely to get divorced than a woman who gets married at 25. And then after 32, your divorce rate goes up more. But 25 to 32, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31 are all better than 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Now you're saying, well, is this the case for Black women? I presume so. Now, if there's any evidence to the contrary, please show me.
Well, hang on. Why would you presume that?
Because the stat is looking at everyone, and I wouldn't know if just this one race of people, all of a sudden, the stat doesn't work.
Well, not
for
just
them.
We would have to isolate it by Hispanics, African Americans. We'd have to isolate it by all types of different demographic groups, right?
The general stat is that's the case. If you get married at 20, you're 50% more likely to get divorced at 25. If you want to isolate it by race, if you're somebody of a particular race and you're like, maybe that doesn't apply to me, then go for it and look it up and see if there's any stats that look at your particular race. Now, we do know that Black women do tend to get divorced more, and they actually get married less. So if you're a Black woman,
they also have more abortions, right?
If you want to,
and they also have worse outcomes for generally inside of society for their children, right?
If you're a Black woman and you want the best likelihood of your relationship with the father, let's say you're married and you have a kid, if you want the best likelihood of that relationship lasting, the data that then you see this stat that the best rates for marriage are 25 to 32. I would say that you can assume that applies to you, unless you want to look up a different study that says that for Black women that all of a sudden getting married younger is better. I don't know why that would be the case.
Well, because if you're going to actually make this claim, if you're going to make the claim, hey, between X and X, I think that there's better outcomes in general for society, then what we would need to do then, for women. Okay, sure. Then what we would need to do then is we would need to isolate this by group, right? That's science. Science is isolation. So what we would need to do is we would need to isolate across all demographics to see if your utilitarian advice would actually be sound for all of them. So the question becomes, is this true for all demographics, or is this only true and because there's so much of one demographic, this is the general advice you want to give, but it's not actually sound advice.
The premise for the debate was should women. If the premise was should Black women or should Hispanic women or should Native American women, then I would have looked more into those women.
They're not women.
But the premise, premise of the
They're
debate
women.
was should women. And then I say, well, here's what the stats say about women, and you're like, well, you didn't look for Black women, and you didn't look for Asian women, and you didn't look for women with one leg, and you didn't look for autistic women, and you didn't look for
because you're coming to bad conclusions again. This is what I've tried to tell you before.
No,
right?
it's not a bad conclusion, Andrew. Okay?
How do you know?
This is actually making me very confident in my argument, because if this is where you're going, this is what the stats show, that getting married after your prefrontal cortex is developed decreases your likelihood of divorce. This is very obvious. You can look this up. U.S. Bureau of Statistics, Pew Research, all of them say the same thing. And you're like, well, we don't know if this is true for Iranian women and Afghani women and blah, blah, blah women. Sure, we can go with that. It may not be true for a specific group of women, but the question of this debate is should women have children young? And this statistic says women tend to get divorced less when they get married older.
The counter to this, hang on, Jasmine, I just let you talk. Be good faith back, okay? The rate for women aged 40 and over was 6.8 times higher for infant mortality.
Wait, what does that have to do with what I just said, though?
Hang on.
Are we moving on?
No. This is key to the argument as to whether or not women should have children when they're younger or not. Right. So,
and you
my
said
metric,
that I didn't isolate
Jasmine, let's let Andrew respond.
Yeah, just try to be good faith for once in your life. You can.
You as well.
Can you address this? Can you actually address this and just tell us that you don't actually care about that? You only care. You don't care that the data here shows that these age groups were statistically significant between them, and that the younger the woman is, the less negative health outcomes she has for herself, and the less chance that her baby has negative health outcomes. You just say, I don't care about that. I only care about the born person. And once they're born, I want to see them have okay outcomes.
Well, okay. So one, we have to talk about what's young. I wouldn't say women should wait till they're 40 if they want to have kids. I would say between 25 to 35 are the ages that I'm looking at. And most children, although they may have slightly worse health outcomes than women who have children at 18, and they can have less kids than women who have kids at 18, I never advocated for 40 and over. I think between 25 to 35, and that is still very good ages to have children, and you're not even a high risk pregnancy until 35, and that in those times you have more of a likelihood to have graduated.
You are a high risk, a much higher risk pregnancy in those time periods. So the reason that I know that, I'm showing it on my screen right now.
35.
No, I'm showing it right now. There was a statistical distinction. Okay,
Andrew,
we can't
see your screen.
You can look it up on cdc.org right now.
Tell me, how big was that statistical difference between a woman having a kid at 20 and 25?
They notated it. They notated it as significant, which means it's more than deviation.
No, well,
which means it's significant.
Have the number? Did you read the study? What's the number?
Well, when they say significant, right, then they're stating
I care
that
how
this
much,
this is not within the realm of
if your argument here is that women who have kids at 25 you can say it's a little bit more likely that your kid will have these negative health outcomes in your pregnancy.
And you'll also be able to have less of them.
You're overwhelmingly likely at 25 to be able to have a fully healthy pregnancy. You're not even considered high risk pregnancy until you're 35. I never advocated for women having kids over 40. So now let me finish.
But 25 is fine. What about 30 though? Why do you recommend them at 30?
I said 25.
But would you recommend? Would you recommend that they have it at 25 rather than 30?
I would say that that's not the biggest factor I would look at. I would look at where you are in your life at 25, right? So even though you may be increasing your list marginally, you didn't even tell me exactly how much, even though if I did that, you would say, I never read it.
Andrew, let her finish.
It's a statistical significance.
She just said to let me finish. I'm saying that you should look at where you are in your life And if you are at a place where you have your socio, like those things, if you are economically, if you are like financially better off, if you are stable, if you have education, if you have those things, or if you're still pursuing those things, you should wait till after those things are done, presuming that it's before like age 45 or 40 or whatever. I'd say like for most, like I can tell you the lawyer way to do it. You go through law school around, you by 25, 26, you're done. You build your career for a few years. And then a lot of my friends, they start having kids 31, 32. I haven't had any of them have any issues. No, let me finish. And I would say that
listen, you filibuster, you won't go a point at a time. You just filibuster the debate.
The only thing you're looking at, if you're only looking at the likelihood of having a birth problem, when the vast majority of women up to age 35 have kids perfectly fine, and those kids are going to have a much better outcomes, be much more, score way higher on their tests. They're going to have higher socioeconomic
I need
status.
to know that it's significant. I need to know that the outcomes are significant. That the rating is, hang on, that the rating, I just shared it, cdc.gov, you can look up this information. Also, peak fertility, according to them, okay, is 22 through 25. That would be the peak fertility for females. Not only that, let's move into the fact that you making women wait because you supposedly want better outcomes has led to a reproduction crisis inside of this nation, where our birth rates are under replacement rates because we're not moving towards having children when we're younger, but rather looking for a materialist outcome. And the materialist outcome, according to you, is yes, we'll have less children, but we're going to hopefully give them a better quality of life. How's that conducive to your utilitarian worldview?
Real quick, before Jazmen answers, this is a question I actually have for both of you because it's going to dictate where this goes. So did you guys want to argue from the woman's perspective or from a societal perspective, or both?
Or you do both.
I guess they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they can be different. If you guys want to do both, then feel free to answer the question.
Yeah, and I would say it's better for both. It's better to have children that are doing better. It's better to have children that are scoring higher in math, science. I have a whole thing. We can go through it. I can share my screen again. The relationship between maternal education and children's academic outcomes. You can look at a multitude of outcomes. It shows the same thing. So while Andrew believes that you should be able to put women, Andrew believes that you should be able to put women in breeding facilities. If our only goal is
believe we should extinction the whole human race.
I'd let you finish. If you don't let me finish, I will stop letting you finish. I assure you. I'm saying that the only outcome we're looking at is breeding. If that was the goal, just how many children can you breed? Yeah, you should start at probably like 16, honestly, like they have in previous societies. And you should just breed as many children as possible. For women, if your goal is to have children that actually thrive, and for you to be in the best position to be the best mother to your child, be the most stable, and have the most likelihood of your relationship lasting with the child's father, you should wait till you are older, and I would say older as 25 and up.
Yeah, so there's big problems here with this, though. So the first one is I just told you what the peak fertility is in women and showed you the dangers that the longer you wait, the worse the outcome is in even having the child. And you also have a lot of women who, because their fertility decreases, have to turn to things like in vitro fertilization and other pathways to have children, which are remarkably expensive. Second, you have not addressed the fact that has led to a reproduction crisis. When you state that they used to have 16 children, that's true. But I mean, it's not necessarily 16, but the reason that they had so many is because the infant mortality rate was so high. If you go back from the 1800s, the year 1800 to the year 2020, you will find that the amount of children that women have had has done this. It's literally just nosedive right out the bottom, with the only exception of that being post World War II during the baby boom. And that's because basically guys got back from the war and humped like rabbits, right? But other than that, there has not been any significant increase in the reproduction crisis of the West. Your advice actually leads to a worse societal outcome of the society itself not being able to reproduce itself. You're negating the fact that the health and welfare of the child and the woman is put at a much higher risk the longer they wait.
No, the health of the child long term. So the risk is about 1 in 1,250. This is from Stanford Medicine Children's Health. 1 in 1,250 for a woman who conceives at age 25. So this idea that you need to be having kids at 18, otherwise your kids are going to be just have this high risk. 20 even. And if you're 25, you have less than one.
What did I say the peak fertility years were?
Yeah, I let you finish. I'm trying to let you finish to see if you will
don't
extend that back to me.
What's
but I'm trying to see. But no.
I just want you to give my argument. That's it.
Okay, fine. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do this because I actually the last 2 times I'm like, let me try to let you finish, and maybe you'll extend the same to me. Even though I think you were going totally off topic too. But if you just want to yell at each other, then let's just yell at each other. That can be the debate. I'm fine with that. My point is that. Yeah, well, I was trying. My point is that and you can't just look at one isolated factor. So while it may be true that in society, it might be the birth rates are declining and that we should have more kids, in our current society, telling people to pop out kids when they can't take care of them, when those kids are going to be poor, when those kids don't have a bright future, I don't think is a good idea. And that's the thing. If you want to, our society right now is built on people needing, for the most part, to actually graduate school, to be able to buy a home. Those kinds of things are important and over for you and your children to flourish. So for you to say, fuck all that, because our birth rates are declining, everyone pop out kids as soon as you can and have as many as possible, isn't, I don't think, going to lead to better outcomes for everybody. We're going to have more people on government assistance.
Poor people shouldn't have kids. That's the entailment.
I don't think poor people shouldn't have kids, but I do wish that poor people would have less kids than they are having. Yes.
Okay, so then they shouldn't have kids. Poor people shouldn't have kids.
I didn't say they shouldn't have kids, but we do have a problem right now with poor people.
Well, how can you hold?
Okay, wait. I'm gonna have to start taking a more aggressive role in moderation because it is getting a little.
Well, I just want to ask this one question: how can you take the contrary position to itself and say poor people shouldn't have less kids? I just wish that poor people would have less kids.
I wish that, but that doesn't mean they should do what I wish.
Yeah, but they should, because remember, your preferences. What do you mean?
Yes, I would say it's actually worse for society because those people are overrepresented in the amount of people who are seeking government assistance, food stamps, they're on welfare because they can't afford to take care of their kids. Now, while I can't tell poor people what they should and shouldn't do, I wish personally, as a person living in this society, although I still think their freedom to have kids and their autonomy outweighs my preferences, I think it's better if poor people or people who can't afford to take care of their kids would stop having them at that rate.
Well,
yes.
Poor doesn't entail that you're not going to take care of your kids. That's one. But two, what you've just outlined is a eugenics program.
It's not a eugenics program. It's
not
that they can't take care of their kids. I said they're more likely, and they do. Poor people that have a lot more kids do tend to ask the government for resources to take care of those kids at higher rates. I didn't say they're incapable of taking care of those kids.
You don't think that the government should provide for poor people's children?
I didn't say that. But my advice to those people, or my preference, would be that people would think harder before having kids that they don't have the money to take care of.
So then your preference is that poor people no longer have children.
I never said that. My preference is
I don't understand how you can hold these two worldviews.
My preference is if you're not, yes, I will say this, because not all poor people are also seeking government assistance. So that's also something to consider. But if you're somebody who's having a kid or you're choosing to have a kid, now if it just happens, it's an accident, but if you're able to make a choice, because we're talking about choice here, right? And if you're able to take precautions or to wait or to use protection, if you're not able or ready to take care of that kid and you're going to rely on the government to take care of the kid, I would prefer if you didn't have the kid, but it's not my decision to make.
Yeah. So your preference, again, just to summarize, is that poor people did not have children.
My preference is that people
have less children, not no children.
And I'm saying that if you need government to take care of the children,
why should poor people have even one child?
If they can't take care of it and they have the choice and they can take precautions to not have the kid and they can wait till they're older, maybe go to school instead of having the kid so that their kid is more likely to be better off.
Let's say those options aren't available.
They don't need the government to take care of the kid. I think that's good advice to give those people. Yes.
Yeah. So what is the metric that you would use then for when you're out of the poorhouse and actually, in Jazmen's worldview, capable of taking care of a child?
I would say one good way is when you don't need government assistance to do it.
So no people on government assistance should have children.
I would say that people
So congratulations, you have just eliminated most of the black people from the United States, Jazmen.
The way you're phrasing it, I just said it's not my decision, but my advice to those people and my preference is that if you are too poor to take care of the child, and you can do things to prevent having a child, like using protection or choosing to wait until you're older, that is better not only for the child, for you, and for society. So yes, my preference is that people do what's better for all three for the mother, for the child, for the father, and for society. Yes.
I want you to understand what you just said. What you just said to me when I asked you this question is, yeah. You said, yeah. My preference would be if they're on any sort of government or state assistance, yeah. My preference is that they don't have children. If we were to follow that to its entailed end, you would eliminate most African-American families and most African-American children, as they are the ones who are the most heavily dependent upon government assistance
and this
demographically
is
to help support their families. Why would you do that? Why do you want to destroy black people, Jazmen?
It's not that
Why do you
I
want to
don't
do
want
that?
them to have kids. I would think it's better for them to have kids in better circumstances. So I think we should be pushing education in those places. We should be giving them better educational opportunities, giving them more resources so that they don't make those decisions, giving them better sex education, because those things are also heavily correlated with people having unwanted pregnancies. I want to prevent unwanted pregnancies.
Sure, you could say that. You could say that you want to
people from
extend
having kids before they're ready to have kids.
So you can say that you want to extend all these things, right? I wish that we could get past it by offering X, Y, and Z. But in the current society, that is not the way that it is set up, right? They're not being offered X, Y, and Z. So in the current society, Jazmen's preference is that black people, for the most part, don't have children.
I don't think it's for the most part. I said that if you are not, I don't
think
most
government
black
assistance, right?
Are most black people on government assistance? Because that's what the logical conclusion of your thing. Because you just I said most black people shouldn't have children. I just said, and if you even want to go by your warped interpretation of what I said that if you need government assistance to take care of your child, so you're saying most black people? That's new to me. Most black people who have children are on government assistance? That's different than saying they're on government assistance at higher rates than white people, but that's not the same thing, Andrew.
So again, let's just assume.
What do you mean again?
Second,
answer what I just said.
Well, let's assume for a second that it's only, I don't know, 20% or 15%, and that whites, let's just assume for white people it's only 5%. We'll just assume that for the sake of the hypothetical, right? It's higher than that, but let's just assume. Okay. If that is true, then you would be, if we entailed your preference out to the rest of society, essentially be disproportionately telling one race over the other that they shouldn't have children, Jazmen.
That would be a disparate outcome of my advice, right? Just like if I say, oh, this should be the limits, this should be the test you need to go in to get into the military, and it may disproportionately negatively impact women because women aren't able to achieve that as much as other people or men are able to achieve it. It has a unequal outcome, but the advice is facially neutral in the sense that it is better. And it is, I think, good to prevent unwanted pregnancies and to have children when you are able to take care of them. Now, even though it's true that this affects Black people more than others, I think it would be good. I think it would be a good outcome for the Black community to stop having all these children when they're too young and they're not able to take care of them, when they don't have the sex education, the sexual education to know how to prevent these pregnancies, when they're on poverty, they're on welfare, they're on food stamps, because that's just perpetuating a cycle where those kids don't thrive. Their kids are more likely to be teen parents. And it's just doing this long cycle. Whereas if they said, okay, I'm actually going to wait. I'm going to wait till I'm like Michelle Obama and have 2 kids and those kids are going to thrive. Now I know she's an anomaly. Then I think that's better. Yes.
I have nothing else to say on the topic. I'll let it stand. I'll let it stand with that.
I'll let it stand with that too. We can go into closing statements, but yeah, I think that's totally a sound advice.
Okay.
And I'm okay with the audience taking that as it is.
All right.
Me too. Me too.
That was a quick one. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We can jump into closing statements then. Let's go with since Andrew opened, let's go with Jazmen for closing.
Okay, so yeah, again, the premise of this was, should women have kids early or should they wait? And most available data, except for a slight between 25 and 35. Now, when I say older, I'm not saying when you're 50, okay? I'm saying probably peak ages 25 to 35. I am speaking against women having kids before age 25. And I would say that these women tend to do better on a variety of metrics. One of those is divorce. You get divorced way less if you're between 25 to 32, and even older than if you're 20. If you are able to get a college education, you should definitely do that, because your likelihood of divorce goes down, and also the outcomes for your children go down, and they even go down after measuring for socioeconomic status, genetics, which I'm assuming means IQ, and family dynamics or family background. So even just education alone, your kids have much better cognitive skills. They're able to test. They score way higher on a number of metrics. They actually tend to live longer too. And it seems like pretty much on every outcome, they tend to do better if you have kids later in life. But even if you don't want to get educated, your outcomes are still better. And this thing's over, but there are stats that also show that children born to women over 25 also tend to do better even without an education. But those two things together increase your likelihood of your child having better outcomes. And if more people did that, I think it would lead to overall better outcomes for society than if we just had a bunch of kids in poverty on welfare. Than if we all had kids young, because we're trying to just go to peak breeding potential and have as many kids and just pop them out as much as possible. Yeah.
Real quick, I'm just going to throw a little statistics in case anyone was wondering. Medicaid in 2016, 43% of recipients were white, 18% were black, and 30% were Hispanic. And then if we look at food stamps, which is 43 million recipients, 36.2% were white, 25.6% were black, 17.2% were Hispanic. Okay, just a fun fact.
So anyway. I guess this means that my advice is disproportionately affecting white people, but okay.
Well, not according to you. According to you, the assumption that you had was that that's my closing things. According to Jazmen, under her assumption that black people were receiving a disproportionate rate of government assistance, and I'm going to quote her here as I was taking notes, I wish that they would. I wish that the people in this group would stop having children if they're poor. That's what she said verbatim. Those were her words. I made sure to mark those words. Now, she probably can't follow her own prattle, but she did actually say for verbatim that black people inside of this group, because they're poor, should stop having children. That's what she said over and over and over again. She outlined basically a Jazmen Jafar eugenics program targeting minorities or anybody on government assistance of any kind. That's what her actual position is. That's the entailment of her position. And the thing is that let's just assume for a second that we were both wrong and that whites are actually disproportionately consuming the amount of government assistance per capita. Under the assumption that they were not, she was still willing to make the claim, because she assumed that blacks were, that they should stop having children, and essentially outlined a eugenics program for it, saying, I would tell all of them, because they're poor and on government assistance, stop having children. That's what she would say. Literally, that's what she said. I couldn't believe it. I was stunned by it, but not overarchingly surprised, because the worldview is a self-centered, selfish, hedonistic worldview. And you can see what it amounts to essentially is just whatever I think inside of my kind of bizarre preferences, which when I take it to their logical conclusion, no poor people have children, especially not disproportionate minorities. None of this is really a progressive view, right? They're all like this. They don't give a shit. Okay, they're a bunch of eugenicists, self-serving, hedonistic lunatics. And I hope I was able to demonstrate that really well during this debate. And I feel like I did.
Also, just to
wow,
clarify,
the comments for once are on my side.
Wait, just to clarify something for the chat. So that was not per capita. That was just from the overall.
Right, it's not per capita, but I was just granting if it was.
Okay. I just want to clarify that for the chat. Yeah, my whole position is I feel like dumb people should breed less. But anyway, that's an aside.
So you're a hedonistic, eugenic, racist.
Yes, he is.
I am, but well, I'm not racist, but I am definitely a hedonistic, mild eugenist in some ways. I'll fully own that. Okay, let's see if there's any good super chats. Okay. I don't want to read any super mean super chats. I appreciate you guys sending me the money, but I'm just not going to read that. And it seems like every single one of them is mean. So, okay. Appreciate the money, guys, but I'm not going to read mean super chats. Okay. Fun debate, I thought. Do you have any super chats on your end, Andrew?
I do, but I always do those off stream. So
Okay.
I appreciate the time. And I don't hold grudges. My job is to represent my worldview the best way that I possibly can. And I appreciate my opponent coming out tonight and having the spirited debate with me. So I never take any of this personally, and I'll never take any of it personally. This is literally my job to represent my worldview the best way possible. And again, all thanks to Alex for hosting this debate. I appreciate it very much. PWF has been very gracious to the Crucible and will always be very gracious back.
For sure, man.
And yeah, I'd like to extend that back. I don't take any of this personally either. And I'm always happy with how these end up because I can go back to my job, which is being a porn star, which I have the freedom to do in this great country of America. So have a wonderful night, everyone.
Based. All right, cool, guys. Thanks for joining. It was fun. Hopefully you enjoyed this. And both of their links will be posted in the description probably in the next hour or two. And I'll see you guys later. Take it easy. All right, bye, Jazmen.
Bye, Alex.
Take it easy. All right, that was fun. Honestly, it's so easy to like armchair quarterback, but I feel like if I was on that second one, I would just be like, yeah, dumb people should breed less. There would be less dumb fucking babies. I don't know. I guess like there's other because you can be like, well, rich people can be like fucking sociopaths and all that could happen. So I guess you really can't like, police this thing. It's all like speaking in theory and like, hypotheticals and abstract. But in theory, it would be nice if if more smart people had babies and less dumb people had babies. Just saying. All right, guys. Appreciate y'all. And I'll see you guys later. Take it easy.